So before I forget, let me log in on the TikToks. And it looks like the stream is up. We've got chats coming in already. There we go. Everything should be up and running. Yeah, we got everything. All right, I think we're live on all the accounts. Welcome in, guys.
What other
Okay.
pages do we stream to?
Well, right now I'm streaming to my Facebook page. I've got a Facebook page that I stream all my
Mm,
stuff to.
okay,
And then I'm also streaming this to my Instagram page.
I see.
And but nobody watches anything on Instagram Live. I don't know why Instagram introduced Live. There's only 5 people using it. Um, and then I'm obviously streaming it to the YouTube and to the TikTok. But we could theoretically stream it to like 100 locations. Like if you guys had other places you wanted to stream it to, I could just add it to the catalog of places to stream to.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't tax my computer extra. With Streamlabs, when we add new destinations, it still only causes us to send one stream to Streamlabs. Their server is the one that's pushing it out, which is different than OBS.
Nice. That actually is nice. Hold on. Wait, maybe they're cooking with that one.
Uh,
Does the Facebook get viewership at all?
I don't know. I get comments on the Facebook videos that I read after I'm done streaming. I don't watch the comments live, but I somebody must be watching them because people are commenting on it.
Yeah. Do you get like a lot of boomers?
There's a healthy
A lot
amount
of
of
threats from
boomers.
boomer.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. That's certainly a thing. Okay, but it looks like we're live on everything. We just need you to guest up on
Yeah,
our
yeah.
unapologetic page. Perfect. All right, we're ready to rock and roll. All right, friends. Well, welcome in, everyone. I think everyone here knows the drill. The link to join is on the screen. It's tinyurl.com/UA guest. And speaking of boomers, Ian, I'm curious at what point do millennials become the new boomers? Because that's the next progression, isn't it?
I thought there was Gen X in there.
Yeah, but Gen X is the forgotten generation. They're going to get forgotten forever.
Yeah. I guess I think. Uh, I suppose millennials already have like a very distinct like character profile to them. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I think as soon as the younger generation starts to despise millennials, which I think is already starting to happen. That's when millennials will become the new boomers.
Yeah. My suspicion is that, oh, misinterpretation says Ian is echoing on YouTube. Is that for real? Okay, 1 second. Let me check one thing. Oh, I think I see why. All right, hold on. Give it, uh, give it a try now, misinterpretations. Let me know if Ian's echoing. Yeah,
Try.
Dog Lover said so as well.
I hope not.
I hope not as well. There's always some sort of tech. This is why I really wish StreamYard would get their shit together because streaming with StreamYard fixes a lot of these audio issues. Like they merge all the audio into one, which just makes it easier. Using Streamlabs, there's always something getting doubled or missed. Okay, the chat says it's better, so I think we're good to
Better
go.
or resolved?
Yeah, those are two different things. I think that the implication is that it's resolved, if I had to
Okay,
guess.
okay.
Yeah, they said fixed it.
Okay. No, that's what I'm always wondering. It's like, okay, it can be better, but is it like,
Is it
yeah,
right?
yeah, right? Like it's not like a true dichotomy, right? Like it's not either like still the same problem or like completely fixed, right? Like it can be like slightly better and still like really bad, but okay, that's fine. That's fine as long as it's fixed.
Oh boy. Well,
Yeah.
anyways, it looks like we got it resolved, and all of our friends are piling in, so we should have a guest up in here soon. For people asking in the TikTok comments, though, if you can come up and chat, the answer is yes, you can, and all you have to do is put the link in the screen into your phone or your tablet or your computer, or if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or elsewhere, you can go to the description of the video and you can just click on the link. You don't even have to type it. That'd be great. And if you're a boomer, you can type it with both your index fingers. It doesn't take very long. You can still get it plugged in.
The one person in the comments who's like spamming, I don't even know what argument this is, but it's like the omega exclusive nor like sigma exclusive nor infinity exclusive nor delta exclusive nor like, and then like a chemistry symbol, and then like what is that, like the natural numbers imply
Yeah, I have no idea what that's supposed to mean.
yeah, I
But
don't know, seems like gibberish to me. It's not a logic system that I'm familiar with.
yeah, I don't know that one at all. I thought I was pretty familiar with the coding languages, and that's a new one for me. Monopoly is in the guest box on TikTok for the 15th time, and I'm pretty sure I said it. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't join over TikTok. You have to join using the link on the screen. If you join on TikTok, nobody can hear you other than the audience. The people on Video Ninja that's being piped into the stream can't hear you, namely Ian and or anyone else that would be pulled in, like
Hmm.
myself. Actually, I might be able to hear him. Anyways, we've got Hi with us. How you doing, Hi?
Hi, how are you doing, guys?
Doing
Doing
good, thank you for
good.
asking. So, Hi, are you at least 18 and are you a believer?
Yeah, I'm 19, and I'm a believer, yes.
Cool. And which God do you believe in?
Uh, I would say I believe a mind created the universe, not necessarily in any religion,
Okay.
because I don't think there is, like, maybe enough solid evidence to believe in one, or
Okay.
enough to convince me.
So what phenomenon, gosh, people tell me that I use the wrong one. So what phenomenon does a mind creating the universe explain that we couldn't otherwise explain?
I think uh, the beginning of the universe is a pretty good one.
Okay, why should we think that the universe had a beginning?
I wouldn't necessarily believe in B theory just because of the fact that it cannot explain how we perceive time. And if you say that's an illusion, it still has order, and an illusion cannot have order under B theory because
So
we experience that passage of time necessary past, present, and future.
how would you explain the fact that time dilation exists in
Yeah,
that
I
if you
can.
were traveling at close to the speed of light, so let's say that you have a clock on a spaceship traveling close to the speed of light, and we have a clock here on Earth, both of the clocks start out at 12, but the clock that is traveling close enough to the speed of light would not experience any time, like the spaceship would not experience any time, whereas in an hour, the clock that's on Earth would read one. So under this, we would have it like that your future, your present, is somebody else's future. So that doesn't seem to make sense if there's only one present that exists.
Uh, I would explain it something between both theories, and I think the present would still exist. It just would be a present for every person. If you know, I guess you know what I'm saying.
It would
But
be at different times is the problem.
yeah, but it's still considered the present moment.
At different times. So we can't
Yes,
have like just one present moment because the present is going to be referring to, like, for one observer it will refer to 12, for one observer it will refer to 1. So there can't just be one present.
yeah, I agree. That's a problem with A theory, but as well there are problems with B theory, as I mentioned. The passage of time and the perceivance of time that we experience cannot be explained under B theory, or
Your
cannot.
critique, well, it can. So at each different moment, there's like a different configuration of brain particles, which means that you're going to experience like a change insofar as it's the brain particles that are producing the experience.
So there is an order in the brain particles. That's the problem. It doesn't matter. So when what you're trying to explain is explain an illusion through an illusion. So it's
I
kind of
feel like that just
circular.
doesn't respond to the critique.
I know it. It does respond to the critique. It doesn't respond to the argument of B theory for time dilation. I cannot explain it, but I don't think it's plausible to believe or to put all your eggs in one basket, considering the fact that we cannot explain something under. A theory and we cannot explain something under B theory.
Well, I just gave you the explanation for it. So it seems like there's something that we can't explain under B theory, or something that we can't explain under A theory, and then we can explain everything under B theory. Sorry,
Can
my
you
words are all
repeat the?
jumbled.
Yeah, sure. It's not problem. Can you explain the again?
Sure.
Because I maybe I
So
didn't understand it.
So your experience of nowness is going to be because of the specific configuration that your brain atoms are in right now. The specific signals traveling across the specific neurons are the things that grant you your experience of nowness. When these neurons shift slightly, as they will in like every passing moment, your brain comes into a different state and you notice the change of brain states. That's how the illusion of passing time arises.
Yeah, but that illusion still has an order, correct?
Yeah, insofar as you form memories that are going to be embedded in your brain, that
So
each brain
how?
state is going to permanently affect the brain and cause like some sort of like both like working memory about the things that the states that your brain has immediately been in, but also like long-term memory if it's significant enough.
Okay, sure. So considering that's an illusion, it needs to somehow be developed. Are you saying that that illusion came from evolution?
Yeah.
And sure, when did it start? Like,
So you're just asking like when consciousness started? I believe it started
no,
with the
I
Cambrian
don't think so.
explosion.
Do you think that monkeys perceive time the same way that we do?
Probably similarly, yeah.
And then for to be an illusion, the illusion still has an order, and there must be an order for that illusion to get from somewhere. I mean,
Well, it's
it,
because there's an order to time, right? Like time has an order. It's just that all moments are equally real, but there are moments that come after and moments that come before relative
uh,
to specific inertial observers.
I don't think that's correct, because if we're according to if we're going to hold B theory, that would mean that, for example, the assassination of the Caesar is happening right now.
No, that's not what B theory holds. B theory holds
No,
that all
it
moments. Are you going to
yeah.
explain my view to me?
Okay, sure, go
So
on.
B theory holds that all moments are equally real in the same way that like the moment the location in space that I'm at right now exists, but so does the one that's like 10 million miles away. That location in space also exists. Likewise, this moment exists, but the moment in time that is when Julius Caesar is getting unalived, that moment also exists. It's not now though. Same like in the same way that like 10 million miles away from here is not here.
I agree. So
So all moments are equally real, but they're not now. Right now is right now. 5 minutes ago was 5 minutes ago. It's all just going to be relative to the location that you're in currently. But there is an order to the specific times with like relative to an inertial reference frame.
sure, okay. So maybe I need to read more on A theory. Maybe you're right. Okay, so let's assume that we hold B theory. Sure. Uh, let's say that, okay, would the universe still be contingent?
I don't know. I think that the universe. I'm probably privy to the understanding that the universe is necessary. If by necessary we mean that it exists in all possible worlds.
No, I wouldn't hold that. I would hold that there is no logical problem in logically conceiving a universe where there are no stars.
Were there? Wait.
For
So,
example,
are we saying that the
it could have been
existence, the mere
different.
existence of the universe, or like the configuration of it?
No, it could have failed to exist. That's what I mean.
The stars or the universe itself?
Both.
Okay. So I might agree with you. It might be plausible that the stars could have failed to exist.
I
Maybe.
don't think there
Although
is a
I
logical
do
problem with it.
kind of hold to, I don't know, I think I'm drawn towards necessitarianism. Although maybe like quantum mechanics considerations would make me think that some things are contingent. So I don't know, like setting that aside, I think the existence of the universe itself is probably necessary. Although the specific objects that exist within the universe, or perhaps even, or yeah, I'll just say like the specific objects in the universe, these might be contingent, but the fact that the space-time manifold exists, I think that's going to be necessary.
Yeah, okay, so I don't know if I agree, because if we imagine that something could have been a different way, why is there a problem with something that wouldn't exist? I mean, if you accept the fact that there would have been an universe where stars couldn't exist, isn't it logically following that you could accept that there couldn't be a universe at all?
No, because I'm gonna hold that time always existed. So if time always existed and time is a part of the space-time manifold, then that means that the space-time manifold always existed. And if the space-time manifold is the universe, then that means that the universe always existed.
So you don't think that God could have? No, it wouldn't make sense for God to exist outside of time. So could then it wouldn't make sense if I say that God and time have always existed. It wouldn't make sense because one, it wouldn't be God then.
Yeah, I agree. You're actually running into like what I think is like a really strong objection to theism, which is that I think God, if God is to be the creator of the universe, then he must exist outside of time because time is within the universe. Like time is like the space-time manifold that makes up the universe. So if God is outside, if God made the universe, then he must be outside of this. But if he's outside of this, then you just run into like a lot of problems. Truly, I think that God being atemporal means like just a million bad things for theism. I don't think that God can take actions if he's outside of time. I think that to take an action, you need to be in like a specific state, right? Like God willing the universe into existence needs to be something that he does in time, because if you're outside of time, then you don't change, right? You don't have future states, which means that you would always have to will the universe into existence. But if God is always willing the universe into existence, then that means that the universe would have always existed, which means that it never came into existence, which would just be a contradiction.
Yeah, I kind of agree. But doesn't atemporal mean that he can like get into the realm of time, for example, take a certain action and then just pop out?
I don't think so, because on my view, I think if God is outside of time, that means that he doesn't have future states. So if God doesn't have future states, then there is no state where he becomes in time.
Yeah, that would be a contradiction. I don't know. I haven't heard that argument before. I think it's a really good one. And
Yeah, it's something to think about, right? I think that God being outside of time is really, really, really hard to reconcile.
yeah, but if we accept B theory, there is no way he's inside of time because it wouldn't make any sense. Okay. Okay, and thank you very much for the talk. I would go back and maybe learn some more about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, hi, it
Goodbye.
was good to hear from you. Cheers. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, he was pretty chill.
Yeah, I'd say so. Welcome in, everybody. I think the friends are filing in. We've got a couple super chats. Let me grab those. Larry Beck, welcome, welcome. Thank you for the 666. Hail Satan, hail Nero. It says the oven is preheating. I think that's a good description. I think we just hit 350. The timer went off, and we're ready to put some stuff in the oven and bake. And Larry, again, thank you so much. Says not all of us boomers are bad. I know, Larry. I apologize. It's the culture wars are real, even if they're only slights. And Space Lord of 75, good to see you this morning. Says time is in the fire in which we burn. Time is in the fire. Is that a quote that I should know about? Hmm.
Is this it's like vaguely reminiscent of like a Nietzsche quote that we should be like dancing in the fires of annihilation, that we should like recognize that our lives are going to end and that it like honestly is going to suck at times, but that we should like revel in this, that we should have like a love for fate, that we should like accept the things that we can't change, and then take that as like our starting point. So I don't know, maybe it's like supposed to be an allusion to that.
Well, I Googled it, and first of all, I read it wrong. It says time is the fire in which we burn. and it looks like the phrase comes from a poem written by Delmore Schwartz. At least that's what Google is telling me. So if you're interested in poetry, that's where it comes from. And I'm not big on poetry, but I'm definitely willing to read some existential poetry. That sounds like my kind of a jam. But
Yeah,
thank you so much
it's
for
a
the
hard quote. Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate that. Also, for anyone who doesn't know yet, tonight at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time, your boy Ian and Deconstruction Joan are going to be on the Atheist Experience, cooking Christians and Muslims and whoever else calls in. So, mark it on your calendars, friends.
Yeah, I'm super looking forward to it. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We've got El Kabong in the guest box now. How you doing, Kabong?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you
Can
for
you
asking.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we can hear you okay. Uh,
Great.
Kabong, are you at least 18 and are you a believer of some kind?
I am, yes, well over 18, and I'm a Buddhist, but I didn't really call about that today.
Hmm.
I have a few questions, if that's cool,
Sure, I
um,
guess.
Hmm.
and we'll see. We'll ask and see how far we get. First, I was wondering. Uh, First of all, I have to say I'm a big fan.
Oh, sure, thank you.
I've discovered you guys recently, and I've been binge watching pretty much everything that you've done that I could get my hands on, and I'm a huge fan. First question, I was wondering why you don't use 1 Peter 2:18 when you're talking about slavery, or maybe you do and I missed it.
Well, I can tell you why I don't use it, right? So the reason why I don't use it is because this is a command to slaves to obey their slave masters. And to me, I don't think that really gets at the root of the problem. I think the root of the problem isn't that he is commanding slaves to be obedient. Not that that isn't a problem. I think what's more problematic is when he is instructing people to own slaves. I
Yeah.
think that to me is the more egregious side of things. So, like when I'm picking verses to pull from, I'm typically trying to pick the most powerful of the verses, and I tend to leave at the side the ones that are less effective. But that's certainly a good verse to reference.
The only reason I bring it up is because and I agree with you. I think that the verses that you do bring up are more effective. The only reason I bring it up is because it's one of the few verses in the New Testament.
Right. Other than Ephesians chapter 6, 9, where he instructs slave owners to be good to their slaves.
Mhm.
And then there's another one from Timothy. There's not a ton in the New Testament. I agree with
That's
you.
why that's why I
Right.
brought it up.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
yeah. So
that's
I
all.
guess I think one thing that I would say about this, like, I totally agree with Justin on this. Like, I think the Peter verse certainly seems indefensible to me as well. But I think it's like maybe perhaps like more defensible, right? Like you can conjure up explanations for it. I don't think you can conjure up explanations for like the Leviticus verse. And even if they say like that's in the Old Testament, the argument is not that the Bible says you can still own slaves. That's not the argument. The argument is that God is supposedly all just. He's supposed to be perfectly moral, but he's saying that you can own people as property. That's just a direct contradiction. And if God in his unchanging nature is all just, like it says, I believe in either Deuteronomy or Numbers,
Yeah,
then
Deuteronomy
there's
34.
yeah, like there's just no way around it. Like it's a direct contradiction. They have to affirm that it's all just, or else the Bible is a contradiction, and also God isn't all just.
I agree. I agree with you. Really the only reason I brought it up is because it seems to be one of the only verses in the New Testament that supports slavery.
Yeah.
So when the theists call in and say, well, that's the Old Testament, that's the Old Testament, that's the Old Testament, I just wonder why you don't say, well, Paul says, you should obey your cruel masters. Anyway, that's all for that. That's a perfectly great answer, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Second question.
Hmm.
When you're talking about abortion, is there a reason that you don't use? Let me see. Let's see.
Numbers 5,
No.
Genesis 21.
Exodus 21:24.
Exodus 21,
It seems
24. If you cause a
it's
miscarriage.
yeah. It seems to me that what they're saying. I mean, the Christo-fascists call it baby Erderme, um, and if you read this passage, it seems to say that infanticide is actually just a property tort.
Yeah.
So the fetus is not a person; it's the father's property.
Hmm.
And if you injure the woman, it's eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But if you kill the baby, you go to court. If the father cares, if the father cares, you go to court and you get some sort of a penalty. But if the father wants to get rid of his own property, that's no big deal at all.
No, in fact, you're allowed to do it. In Deuteronomy 21, there's a provision for stoning your unruly son, who's already
Exactly.
been
Exactly.
born. And
So I'm wondering why you don't use this. I know you use the passage about the poison,
the bitter
drinking
water
the,
in
the
Numbers
dirty
5.
water. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But I'm wondering, I haven't yet heard you use this passage, and I'm wondering if you think this is weak also,
Well,
or
I don't know if
what you
it's
think about
weak. It's just that the abortion topic really never comes up. I mean, I can think
it. Okay,
of, I can count, like I've been doing this for almost, it'll be 2 years at the end of the summer, and I can count on one hand how many times the abortion topic has come up. It's not
okay,
really something that comes up often, but if somebody does bring it up and they have enough attention span that we can cover some Bible verses, I would typically go to this verse if they had the attention span for it.
okay. I haven't heard you do it, but I don't know. Okay, third one. If we still have, if I'm still cool to go on.
Yeah, sure.
Uh, okay. Uh, I get this. I follow politics a lot, and I get there's this thing where they tell the right wing tells the Christians they're being persecuted. They're being persecuted. They're constantly being persecuted, and they get them to vote the way they want to because they tell them how badly they're being persecuted by the left wing and by this and that and the other and modern society. But it seems to me that in Matthew 5:10 to 12,
Hmm.
that they should be welcoming their persecution.
Right, yeah, I agree.
And I'm wondering if you think that's a reasonable argument against the whining.
Well, yeah, I mean, I personally don't. I try to avoid politics because I don't want my live stream to become about politics because it seems like once you dabble in politics, you can never exit because that's all people
True.
ever want to talk about. And
True.
I mean, I'm actually pretty politically active. I stay on top of the news. I read the bills in Congress, but I just don't want to make my live streams about politics.
I got
Al-
you.
Also, I think like the response to Christians saying like we're persecuted isn't like yeah, and you should be happy. It's no, you're not. That's
Right.
not true.
Well, I agree. I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you. But if there was a biblical argument, I thought this might be it.
I mean, there actually is quite a bit of biblical argument for the position that you're holding. I just don't know how often we would get to have that argument because if we're not, every once in a while we do get people who come up here and say, well, the Bible is true because Christians are persecuted and the Bible said we would be persecuted. But the problem is that that conversation kind of has a different terminus. That usually goes the route of, well, the Bible's true because it's predicting stuff. Now you have to have a discussion on whether or not the Bible's actually predicting things. And then you never usually get back to the original topic, which is whether or not they're even being persecuted.
Right, right. And speaking of prophecy, I've listened to so many of these conversations where you argue with these theists over prophecy, and what they don't seem to ever acknowledge, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but they never seem to acknowledge that you're supposed to be able to read the prophecy in those days and know what's going to happen. In
Yeah,
other
I agree.
words, they never seem to realize that a prophecy is supposed to be something that you read and you say, now I know what's going to happen in the future and when.
Right.
Most of their prophecies are post hoc rationalizations.
Well, all of them are,
Uh,
yeah. They're just a cope for the fact that Jesus died, rather than doing what the Messiah was supposed to do. And so that's why
but
in
I,
the New Testament you have this nonsense that Paul talks about, where he says, like, well, Jesus wasn't, directly prophesied. He's in the types and the shadows. Like
right, right,
he was hidden. God hid him in like these little grammatical nuances of the Old Testament. And so Jesus, as much as, people use the God of the gaps argument, Jesus is necessarily, a Messiah of the gaps, where they'll find weird grammatical anomalies and be like, oh, look at this grammatical anomaly. It must be a secret thing about Jesus. And that's all they really have to hold on to, because if you read the prophecies at face value, not a single one refers to Jesus.
right, exactly. But I guess maybe I'm wishing sometimes you would ask them, you would say, well, do you think that these prophecies were written for you to read them and then know what was supposed to happen in the future? Or do you think that this prophecy was written so that sometime later you could, you know, go back and look at it? Because
Well, they obviously
I
think it's
never,
the latter of the two, right? They think that it was written for a
I don't
future
think they,
generation.
I don't think they considered it. I don't
Well,
think they consider
I
it.
think they have. I've had this discussion with them before, where we have to go over like Ezekiel and Deuteronomy 18, where God basically is suggesting that these prophets need to have their prophecies tested, and that's how you know if they're a real prophet. And so it has to be a clear prediction. Like we do this explainer pretty often with them, because it's pretty common that a Christian gets up and wants to say nonsense, similar to what you're suggesting, where like Jesus is kind of hidden in the text, and like it's for a future generation to suss out. So that's why we do what we do. But anyways, El, we've
Okay,
got another person in the queue waiting to get in, and we do need to. This is a debate space,
got
but
it. I hear you. I hear
uh,
you.
we appreciate the questions.
Yeah.
Last thing, just one last thing. I heard uh, Ian say that he was going to study rhetoric because the truth uh, is sometimes or mostly ineffective,
Oh,
and
shit.
I
Rhetoric should be
I
studying
True.
Ian.
I
Hold
I
on.
I applaud him for that, and I'm wondering if he's made any headway in that direction.
Yeah, I've read like some of the classical texts on rhetoric. I think what I really need to do, I just can't pull myself away from philosophy. Like there's always more philosophy that I want to learn. But I think like kind of the broad plan of the things that I want to learn right now, I want to learn there's a couple of arguments that if you get good at them, it takes out literally every argument in favor of like Christianity, for example. So if you have an argument for why God can't cause anything, then that means that like Christianity just dies immediately, right? Like it's over. There's no argument for like the resurrection is over. The cosmological argument is over. The fine tuning argument is over. All these arguments are over. So I want to get like these like big broad arguments up and going, and then I've read like texts on rhetoric, but what I really need to do is like actually sit down and make the specific arguments that I make rhetorical. Because if like it's one thing to have the argument, it's another thing to be able to explain it in a way that like connects with the brain really well. So I don't know. That's kind of what I'm looking to do in the future after I get some of these like really overreaching arguments on the table. After I get them down, then I want to develop them rhetorically. But yeah, I've read some books on it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I applaud you, and I really appreciate you guys. Thank you very, very much.
All right, thanks so much, Al. Good to hear from you. W's for L, and we've got Tammy joining us now. Give me just a second. All right, Tammy, welcome in. Can you hear everyone? All right, well, Tammy, your microphone's muted. You've got some hard.
Are you okay?
I'm not sure Tammy is okay. So, Tammy, we'd love to hear what you're saying, but unfortunately, your microphone is muted. Not on my end, on your end. You've got to unmute your microphone on your end. Uh,
Tammy, you look hinged right now.
I don't know what's going on with Tammy. Tammy's going to
We
have quite a day today.
Tammy, we can't hear you. You gotta unmute your microphone. Are you okay? Do you need us to call someone?
Tammy, we can call 911 for you if you need. And that's a great little King Jimmy Bible, but I mean, if you're in the King James only movement, you need to at least get a 1611. That's the real King James. No one can hear you, Tammy. We'd love to hear you. I mean, it sounds like you're even singing. It looks like you're singing from here.
You seem like very animated. We would love to have a conversation with you. You need to unmute your microphone.
Tammy, we can't hear you unless you unmute your microphone. It's muted on your end. Your hardware is muted. This is something. Tammy,
She's
I don't know
We
what you're
need to hear
doing.
your microphone in order to hear your reading. It's like a necessary precondition, a transcendental thing, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, since we can't hear you, we presume you can hear us, which means you're just ignoring us. We're going to move on to somebody else, okay? It was delightful getting to see you crash out silently, but I don't know how much time we have for that nonsense.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah, we
welcome in.
yeah, we can only ask for you to unmute your microphone so many times.
Paz, welcome in.
Hey, what's up?
Not too much. How you doing?
Doing all right, you guys?
Yeah,
Doing
doing pretty
good. Thank you for
well.
asking. Paz,
So
are you at least 18 and are you a believer of some kind?
I am well over 18, and no, I'm not a believer.
Huh?
Mm.
W atheism.
Yeah, what are you
Yeah,
here for?
I just had a random question for you guys. So I had one of the I call them Bible pushers come by my home today, like within the last hour, and I completely ignored them. But my question would be, what would you recommend me to say to them when they come back, because they come around every few months.
That's up to you, I guess. I'll tell you a story. I have a really good friend named Danny Philpock, and him and I were in LA at the beginning of last month for a shoot against a sophist that hasn't come out yet. But um, him and I, like the day prior to the filming of the episode that we did, we were walking around a mall in LA and we encountered like two twin brothers who were just going around like asking people like, how do you celebrate Easter? And we could have debated them, right? Like we could have like buckled down and like really torn them to pieces. Me and Danny are like highly qualified to do exactly that. But like maybe there was just no point, right? Like if they're not hurting people, maybe it's fine. Although I don't know, it might be different if it's like someone who's actually saying like go and believe in the Bible. So I don't know. I guess that's really up to you. If you want to engage, then you can engage with them.
Yeah.
You can ask them like a fairly soft question, like, hey, what's the evidence that it's true? Alternatively, you can just say, no, I'm an atheist. I'm all right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the route to go is to ask them questions that will allow them to probe deeper into their belief system. Because a lot of these people going door to door, a lot of them are Jehovah Witnesses, and I know a little bit about the JWs. And a surprising amount of the JWs they're kind of only doing it because of social pressures. They're not doing it because they're like sold out and on fire for the Lord and they just want everyone to know about it. They're doing it because their church tells them that they have to do it. They don't really have a choice. And so these aren't like people that are skilled in theology. So if you ask enough really good questions and lead them to the parts of the Bible that they've never actually read, you can get pretty far in, we're going to say, starting their process of deconstruction for them without turning it into an argument.
Yeah, that's always the excuse me, the hardest part. It seems to try and stray a conversation into like not an argument with certain kinds of people. Yeah, I do understand they're completely pressured. Mormons as well are another one that are extremely pressured into doing the same kind of thing. But they just keep coming around, and I'm at the point where it's just like, how do I politely ask them again to not come back? Because all that happens is a new fresh batch will just show right back up again in a few months.
So
You should get like a bloody satanic altar right outside your door.
Well, it's already there. It's done nothing.
you could get a like a no solicitation sign or something akin to that. Or you can do like what you might get in the South, which would be like, all trespassers will be shot on sight, type of sign.
Well, our town actually does not allow solicitation, but it doesn't seem to stop any of them. They always just say the same thing, and this is for sales as well. They just like, oh, we talked to the police and they're okay with it. It's like, no, they're not. You're not supposed to be doing this. Like, just stop doing this. Just hang out in the street on Main Street, put your little signs up, and if someone's curious, they'll come up to you and just leave it at that. But you're physically going to people's homes. Like, I'm not going to go around knocking on people's doors being like, hey, you want to be an atheist today?
Right. Yeah. Well, are they coming in suits or no suits?
I think they're wearing nice jeans, belts, and then just like a white polo. And they
White
have that
polo.
stupid lanyard as well.
Of course, there's a lanyard, obviously.
Always the lanyard. I couldn't, based on what they look like, I couldn't determine what religion they followed, but more than likely it's probably Jehovah's Witness. Even though in my town we have a large Seventh-day Adventist community here, and those people again are pretty out there.
Well, I'm a big fan of passive aggressive moves in these situations, and here's what I would do. And this is me; it's not for everybody. When if they usually come at the same time, you usually see them coming. They're like walking down the road. Half the time when they're coming, it's like a Sunday morning, and what I used to do on a Sunday morning was like work on my car or my truck or something because there's always something that needs fixed. Now I'm mostly streaming, but like, shit, just go out to your garage, get a handful of grease, make it look like you're working on your car, and go out and shake their hands, get them all greased up, all to hell. Don't give them anything to wipe on. Now they got to walk away from your house every time with greasy hands, and they have nothing to wipe them on except for their shirts or their pants. They'll stop coming around eventually.
Oh yeah, that's a very nice passive aggressive. Because I was thinking of something else where to make them as uncomfortable as possible, but even then, I don't think they're gonna, because they go to so many houses. You would think that they would go back to their group and be like, "Hey, we should probably avoid that house. That guy was just like farting nonstop and
Yeah.
like spitting, and he was yelling at a squirrel at one point." But I don't think that they're going to like convey that information to the people in the future.
Yeah,
I
give
think
them
it
a
depends on
reason
your
not to come back.
goals. Well, so if your goals are like strictly like you do not want them to interact with you, then you probably just don't want to engage with them at all. I imagine that when you
Yeah.
engage with them, if it's like organized, after you engage with them, you become like the type of person with whom they can engage. So I would imagine that they would probably send more, although I don't know, that's just pure speculation on my part. I don't know. Like just say, hey, take me off your list. Don't come back here. I'm not interested. Don't come back here.
Yeah, yeah. At this, I was hoping to do something like that, and mainly because to me that's a type of missionary, is what they're doing, and that's the one big thing for me against any kind of religion is they think it's missionary work's incredible, it helps people, but at the same time it's not. You're trying to change someone's culture based on
Right.
your own thing, which I'm staunchly against. So like I kind of want to have that discussion with them, but that's usually just them going, well, we'll see you later. It's like, no. Listen to what I have to say. And then, this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to get me to listen to what you have to say.
Right.
So listen to what I have to say, and then we can move on. But it just doesn't seem to work out like that.
Right.
Yeah, you have to hit him with the Kamala Harris. Do not come. Do not come.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, if it was me, you just don't want to even have a conversation with them at all. I would just find something about your doorstep that would chase them away. Shit, just make sure there's always mud on your doorstep.
Yeah, I'll definitely do something. Maybe I can get my inverted cross out there or something.
Yeah, hell yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's all I got for that, I think.
Yeah, do you have anything else? Hello?
I think he might be talking while he's muted.
Yep, I did that.
There we go.
I muted it. That was funny. No, that's all I had for the most part, because it seems that we're all going to be in agreement.
All right, well, it's good to hear from you. I appreciate the questions.
Not a
Yeah,
problem.
for
Thank
sure.
you for picking up.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
You too.
We got some super chats and some good questions.
Well, before we go on to super chats, we should probably mention we currently have nobody waiting to talk to us. If you want to talk to us, the guest request link is tinyurl.com/uaguest. We would love to talk to you. If you join up, you will be the first one who gets to. We do ask that you be a believer. We're probably looking for conversations about God. We probably won't be happy if it's like, well, I think I call the universe God, and I think the universe exists, because then we don't disagree on anything. We also think the universe exists. But please, please, please be a believer in God. And if you want to discuss, there's nobody waiting in line. We would love to talk to you. Again, the link is on the screen. It's tinyurl.com/uaguest.
And we would repeat also that we are not taking guests on TikTok. We're streaming to the TikTok, and you know that we're on TikTok because you're on TikTok with us, but we can't take guests over TikTok because of the way technology works. We can't all interact with each other at the same time because of the limitations. So you got to use the link on the screen. But I believe in you. And Rahul, thank you so much for the super chat. It says, what did you guys do to Dr. Blitz? We need the unholy trinity. Well, unfortunately, Dr. Blitz couldn't join us this week, but he should be back next week. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Although he might still be on vacation, so I don't know.
Right. So Dr. Blitz has got some stuff going on. He should be back with us shortly. And trust me, we missed Dr. Blitz too. We missed like the science portion of this whole of the show, and but we'll be back at full force either next week or the week after. And Unashamed Apostate, thank you so much for the super chat. Big W says, when the Jehovah Witnesses come to your door, don't engage. They will put you down as a return visit and will not go deep, but they will send others again, asked to be put on the do not call list. I didn't know that they actually had like a do not show up list. That's interesting. Because I've been around religious people for a long time, and my understanding is they treat you the same way telemarketers treat you. When they put you on the do not call list, they're like, yeah, whatever. We'll call you next week.
Wait, so are Jehovah's Witnesses the ones that think that like only 144,000 people get into heaven?
Yeah, but they've amended that belief now that it's like statistically silly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, why the fuck would I ever believe in that? My odds are just really bad.
It was a more tenable belief when they were like, yeah, Jesus is coming back in 1984, or whatever. And then once the religion grew past 144,000, then they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, it puts a real cap on things. Yeah.
Oops. Nathan, thank you for the $10 super chat. Says, if God is all knowing and all good, why would he create somebody knowing they would be damned for all eternity? And if God knows everything before it happens, is there any free will? Well, I think those are two questions. And the first question is, to me personally, I agree with you. It's weird that an all-knowing, all-good God would create somebody with the intention that they would be damned to hell, which is implied in the Bible. That's all there. So that to me means that he can't be all good. Your second question, which
Wait,
is...
can I say something about the first question?
Yeah.
I think probably the least defensible doctrine, or one of the least defensible doctrines in all religions, is the doctrine of hell. I don't think that there's any way to possibly justify hell as an outcome for anybody. I think that if your position is anything other than everybody gets into heaven, I just think that you have like no game. Like your religion is just going to be like absurd. You will have to bite like absurd bullets about the nature of justice. And I just don't think that you should do that. So I think like what would be reasonable to me is either like God foresees everyone who's going to get into heaven and then he only makes these people, or alternatively, he just makes everyone in heaven, right? You know, God just makes everyone in heaven and then everyone is able to form a relationship with him knowing that he exists. That to me seems way more reasonable than this game of like, where's Waldo that we have to play with him. But yeah.
100%. 100%. And the second question, I was going to pass to Ian because I agree with you. I think if God is all knowing and he set everything into motion, then he's responsible for how everything plays out because he knew how it
Yeah.
would play out before he did it.
Yeah, I so there's two things to say about this. There's like a good formulation of this argument, and then there's like the bad formulation of this argument. The bad formulation of the argument still works on a lot of people. Like it works. It's just like there are issues. So what the theist probably wants to say is that God God has the knowledge that he has because of the action that you take, not the other way around. That your action causes God's knowledge, like retro causes God's knowledge, not that God's knowledge causes your action. And if that's the chain of causality, then that's actually not a problem. What I do think is a problem is that if God foresees, if God is like selecting like what world he wants to create, you know, the world where we're all like electrons who have like feelings and emotions, or the world where we're all goats, or the world where we're all octopuses, or like something like this, you know, God can make any world he wants. If God is all knowing, he knows the exact timeline of every single world for all possible starting conditions that he gives for any of these worlds. He knows all of the outcomes, all of the timelines. So he's looking not just at the starting conditions, but also at the complete timelines. And by extension, he's selecting not just the starting conditions, he's selecting the entire timelines. If God knows exactly what's going to happen, if God were to make this world as opposed to that world, then God makes all of these events inevitable via his foreknowledge. If God knows something, then it's inevitable. So through God's action of selecting this world, God selects for all of these events to become inevitable, which means that God determines them. And I think that that one actually, I think that that's the argument that works and comes to the conclusion that we don't have free will if an all-knowing God created us.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And Tim, thank you for the super chat. Tim says Mormon missionaries have records on everyone they speak to and a do not call list too. Source, you were one. I actually didn't know that. So like if I get a Mormon missionary show up at my door and I say, "Hey, don't come back," I assume that if they do come back, that they're disobeying their own orders, which means they're bad Mormons. I would call them out for that. That's interesting. I didn't know that these people had like a do not show up or do not call list. I've actually never had a Mormon come to my door, and I'm a little disappointed that they never have. Oh well, what are you gonna do? I've met Mormons in real life, but never at my door. And I don't know if it's because the state I live in just doesn't have a lot of Mormons, but like I would like to sit down and talk to some Mormons and get their backstory and hear like how they became Mormons. Because my suspicion is that Mormonism today is mostly people are born into it, right?
Yeah, I would imagine so. I don't think that it's like very compelling.
Like I can't,
I
I've
also
never.
think, oh, I was just gonna say, like, I know like a good number of Mormons. I've talked to a good number of Mormons. It sounds like a miserable life. Like missions sound horrible. It sounds like everyone is just like insanely cruel to you. And like for what? For like some made up religion?
Well, that's how you know it's true because the Bible said we'd be persecuted, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
They,
Yeah.
they're gonna hate you because they hated me first. And you think maybe they hate you because you're coming to their doorstep and they just want to watch kickoff. Get out of here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now listen, if the missionaries showed up with like some nachos and some cheese dip and like they were gonna watch the game with you, shit, I'd invite them in if they showed up with food.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That sounds like a blast. I don't know. You just get some friends.
The missionary tactic, I think, is deeply flawed. They need to do what youth pastors do and just feed people. Like if you ever met a youth pastor, you know that the key to getting kids in the door is to make sure they get like pizza or other food while they're there.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I don't know. I think that religions need to adopt like the tried true religion strategy where you encourage all of your followers to procreate and then you just indoctrinate the children.
Yeah,
It's like
precisely.
it's like old reliable. They've been doing it for centuries.
All right, we got a guest waiting to get in. Let me grab the guest. If you're watching the stream and you want to be a guest and demonstrate to us that we're filthy, dirty heathens and we're wrong, there's a link on the screen, tinyurl.com/UA guest. You could be a guest on the show and have a discussion with us about your particular deity and or religion. But coming into the box, we've got Omni Kevlar. How you doing, Omni?
Hey, how's it going? Friendly here, no ops. So, just wanted to give you guys some company until the spirit of fear gets removed from these Christians.
It certainly has not been removed.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to ask you, Justin. Typically, sometimes when I listen to like Christian apologists and Muslim apologists, they have ways of digging at each other. And a common move that I see from Muslim apologists is they'll make this claim that no early church father before the Council of Nicaea uh, believes or expresses proper doctrine of like the Trinity. I wanted to get your take on that. Do you think that the Muslim apologists have like a fair point, or do you think they're kind of like stretching words when they say that and like connecting dots and not reading what words mean?
Yeah, I think they're missing the Edict of Theodosius II. Let me get the date real quick. So the Council of Nicaea, when was the Council of Nicaea?
Oh, let's
I
see if I
thought
got this. Is
I
it
thought
like
it was
360?
325. Yeah, so it
Oh,
was fourth
okay.
century, so pretty late. And but we've got the Edict of Theodosius II, if I can type it right. Oh, well, that was just slightly after the Council of Nicaea. So actually, that might be the Council of Nicaea might actually be the earliest, um, we'll say, deep dive on the Trinity that we have documented. Although I would say that, like, if you're reading the Gospel of John, I don't know. The Gospel of John seems like you can read it and push it to the view of a Trinity. Like if Jesus legitimately is God and God is just one, there's not multiple gods, then you can find the Trinitarian view in there or like the the oneness view like the United Pentecostals have. It can be found there. But like as for an official ruling on the Trinity, there's not one that's super early.
Yeah. Well, does John, and I don't think John mentions anything about the Holy Ghost being God though, does it, or does it?
Well, I don't know. So the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, seems to be on this like the same level as Jesus. So Jesus says that the even the the Holy Spirit will lead you in all truth, and that the Holy Spirit even searches the mind of God. And it seems to be that the Holy Spirit is a divine entity in its own right. And so, if the Holy Spirit is a divine entity in its own right that is capable of making decisions and doing things on its own, like Paul says, the Holy Spirit distributes gifts as it sees fit, then we're going to give agency to this thing, right? So, if the Holy Spirit has agency, but it also is part of God, then we've got this really weird thing where God has two different agencies. like a 2-in-1. So then, I mean, you can add Jesus to that, and now it becomes 3-in-1. But still, it's a nonsensical claim because anyone with a brain would just say, well, those are three gods.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
You know, it's only the Christian that has to go to these weird interpretations of like, well, shit, we can't have polytheism, so now we have to make up new forms of mathematics to, you know, or different forms of logic to say that somehow we don't have three gods.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's all I pretty much got. I guess one other thing, uh, I thought it was so amazing. I wish Dr. Blitz was here because then I'd like to talk to him about black holes because like I just recently learned about the history of like, if I'm correct, where it's like Einstein with his theory of relativity, like, you know, made a bunch of predictions and then like some artist came up and was like, oh, according to these equations, this is what a black hole should look like. And then we finally discovered or got to see one through a telescope in 2018. And it's just so amazing how, like, I just think about that with religion, where, okay, here we have these people making these predictions. I would forgive someone for not being convinced, just like I'd forgive someone for not being convinced of what a black hole is because they just don't understand the theory of relativity. But then now it's like, oh, we've got this extra confirmation of what a black hole is, and yet we don't have anything like that with religion. It's like, what's going on here? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I haven't. It's not to go back to the original point.
yeah,
It's
that's
been
fine.
a while since I've read through the Didache. The Didache is a very early church document. You might give that a look to see if it mentions anything that could be drawn out and interpreted as Trinitarian.
Okay.
Because that is a legitimately early document. That's like probably beginning of the second century.
And they were probably wasn't that document also close to like being added to the canon of the Bible?
I mean, to be fair, I would have added it if I was an early Christian.
Yeah. So, well, anyways, that's all I had. You guys have a good rest of your stream. So take
Good to hear
care.
from you, Amni.
Yeah.
We've got a couple people waiting to get into the guest box. I see Don, Giraffe, and David. We're going to get to everybody that we can. And Quiet Ink with the super chat. Thank you so much, Quiet Ink. We appreciate the super chat. It says, can we talk about how Adam and Eve had 23 daughters and only the two who married Cain and Abel were named, passing daughters out like candy? So this is a frustration that I've had with the Bible is how often you know, there are women in the stories and they're just nameless. Like
Yeah.
they can't even be bothered to give names to the fictional
Yeah.
female characters
Yep.
because it was just written by men and the women didn't really matter. They're just like plot devices, you know what I mean?
Yeah, unless they do something bad, and then you need to know their names so you can know. Don't be like Eve, for example.
Right, exactly. That being said, I don't know how many daughters they had. The Bible doesn't really tell us. There's like some Jewish folklore that dives into the children of Adam and Eve. But yeah, it's kind of presumed that they probably had a shit ton of kids if they had to populate the earth. And they lived for hundreds of years. Grimlock, good to see you, friend. Thank you for the super chat. It says, need a shirt that has Jesus wearing a Waldo shirt saying, where's Jesus? Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, the Where's Waldo game really should have been Where's Jesus because he's been hiding for so long. He must be in the trees. That's why they keep telling us to look at the trees.
Yeah.
So Don, welcome in. How you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
And can you see me? Okay. First off, I want to say thank you guys for having a platform where people can go on here and do this. I appreciate it. I don't believe there's enough conversation between people that believe and people that don't. And so you guys are great in doing the work. So I appreciate that. I am a Christian. I do also want to, I know that you guys have had some people that got on and they just wanted to talk. So I am open to if you wanted to give those people the space as well, because I don't actually have any idea where this is going to go. I'm just curious to talk to you guys. Sometimes I see Dr. Blitz. I've actually come across this stuff a couple of times, and I was just like, and then when you guys said it, I was like, okay, so you guys seem to go together. So I don't have any. I am a believer. I believe in Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. as far as any debates, I don't know that much about you guys and where you are theologically, philosophically to even get into a debate. So I'm just curious to see kind of where you guys are at in general.
Well, we've probably encountered like just about any argument you could throw. So if you have, is there any piece of evidence that you find like particularly compelling, or an argument that you think is like really strong and motivating for God's existence, or for like the truth of
Um,
Christianity, or anything like that?
I can tell you that I believe so. If you guys have heard every argument that you can throw, that sounds like a wonderful thing. Can I just ask before I present anything? Is the point of this? What is the? I appreciate the benefit of it. What is the mission or goal or purpose of like us getting on and talking? I know that from
Oop.
He froze up on us. Oh, okay then.
Oh, wait. Don, no.
His
Don.
his connection before he came in had some red bars, so I suspect he just
Is he back?
having some connection issues. It looks like he might be reconnecting. Give him a second.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
there he is.
we got him back. All right, let me add him up. Welcome back, Don.
You're muted. We
Sorry,
can't hear you.
are you good to go now?
Oh, wait. Say more words?
can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can
Am
hear
I
you.
able to be heard? Okay, cool. Yeah, it sounds like deconstruction. See, I can see you. It sounds like you have some Christian background. And Ian, is it Ian?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And please, guys, like, never mind. I'm just gonna get into it. So you guys asked. I've heard everything. I think that honestly, I think that when I listen to a lot of people like Jordan Peterson being like a huge influence on my life. I'm reading 12 Rules of Life, and I've listened to all of his lectures on the Bible. When I'm from, if what he's saying is true about how humans are neurologically, I know created is probably going to be like a word for you guys, but we can say created by evolution. We can say that we are evolutionarily predisposed to understand stories like in a very impactful way. Like stories are motivating enough to motivate us to do something in real time. And I would say that to me, the greatest story would be the Bible. And I know that there's a lot of questions as far as like, I heard you guys talking about some internal conflicts and contradictions that you guys might have. But I
Yeah.
ultimately believe that the Bible is the. I'm sorry, do you hear a lot of cracking in the background?
There's some
It's
crackling, but
like
it's not bad.
faintly. It's
Okay.
not bad. Yeah, it's like easily
Okay,
workable.
sorry. I have two dogs, so
That's
that's what they're
okay.
doing. But I believe that the Bible is a literary form about the story of God and the creation and his relationship with us as the, let's say, the rulers of creation. It's
Mm,
what it says in Genesis. So um
sure.
that's where I'm coming from. Now I know there's probably a lot of internal contradictions, so I am open to hearing where you guys are coming
Yeah.
from
Although
as well.
maybe I could start with this, right? Because I'm like at this point I'm like the SEAL Team 6 of like dismantling specifically Jordan Peterson. So I
Okay,
will make like
interesting.
one brief mention before I'll allow Justin to go into like Bible contradictions. So Jordan Peterson's view of things is that the world is like an extremely chaotic place, and that the only way that we can order it is by having like some aim. We need to be aiming at something in order for any of the world to make sense. Oh no, he dropped again.
Oh
That's
no,
so sad.
I don't know if he must not be on Wi-Fi. He must be on a cell phone.
Oh
That's too
no,
bad.
yeah, it is too bad. If it happens more, we'll need to move on.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. But no, I don't know. He seems like a nice enough guy.
Yeah, he even came ready with his microphone and camera turned on. Welcome back, Don.
I'm probably just gonna. I don't know why it keeps dropping like that. I'm probably just gonna join on my phone. So feel free.
Okay.
I'm super interested to hear what Ian was saying, but
Yeah.
it keeps dropping. So I want to get into a more reliable method of communication.
Absolutely. We would appreciate that. Yeah, definitely.
All right, cheers. Join back on your phone. We'll pull you right up.
Yep.
All right, sounds
Yeah.
good.
All right.
Gosh, the TikTok stream is getting like no reach.
It's a weird week. The last couple of weeks we've had like 700, 800, 900 people in the TikTok stream. This week not so much. Maybe because the last 2 weeks we streamed to TikTok, we got restricted for unoriginal content. We already got restricted this week, most likely just didn't see it.
Bro.
TikTok's the worst.
Yeah, this app, like genuinely, oh my God, how I yearn to have like a self-sufficient YouTube presence. Oh my God.
Well,
You'll never see me here again. No, I'm kidding.
there's been a couple big
Yeah.
creators go to YouTube and not come back to TikTok.
Yeah, like who can blame them, right? You know.
Right. There was a creator named Christy Burke that I think was really big on TikTok just before I got on. And I discovered her because she started a YouTube channel, and then everyone on her YouTube channel was like, "Oh my God, I saw you on TikTok." And that's how I ended up on TikTok, was by watching her on YouTube, and I realized that TikTok was a really great platform for like rapid growth. But I still the platform itself is ridiculous. But then shortly after I discovered Christy, I discovered that she was no longer going to do TikTok. I was like, why? You can grow so fast on TikTok. Then
Yeah.
I realized, oh, it's because the AI police, and it doesn't like hardly pay anything. And,
Yeah.
oh, he drove down his phone, then he dropped.
Yeah, like the question is like grow into what, right? Like grow, it's there comes like a point in time where your following is big enough where it just doesn't make sense to be doing TikTok anymore, right? Like if every week on TikTok all you make is like, I don't know, let's say you're doing like really well. You're like kicking ass. Let's say you make, I don't know, like 150 maybe. Like it's just kind of hard to justify if you're streaming like every day for however many hours a day. Whereas if you were doing this on YouTube, you'd just be making like way more than that.
Yeah, oh, for
Um,
sure. And even like the video playbacks, like when I do a live stream, the I'll earn like $100 just on people watching the live stream the next day, because YouTube ad revenue pays well, right?
yeah, exactly.
But you live stream on TikTok, no, it doesn't save it. Nobody's watching it back. No one's catching the replays that they missed while you were live. Um, Anyways, Don got his phone cooked him apparently. So let's grab Giraffe, and if Don comes back, we'll grab Don next.
Yep.
Welcome in, Giraffe.
Oh, fuck.
Hello.
He came
So
back.
unfortunate.
All right, sorry,
How
Don.
do we want to handle this?
Giraffe, we're gonna put you down for just a moment and see if we can get
That's fine.
Don's technology working. Sorry, we didn't know if he was coming back or not. I feel bad now, but let's try to finish what we started with Don. How you doing, Don?
I'm good. Can you see me, hear me? Everything working well?
Yeah, we can see you and hear you.
Okay. I'm also if you I don't know what was saying between draft, I was trying to get back in, but if you guys wanted to continue with that, I know if y'all were having a good conversation, I don't want that to
No,
be cut
we
off.
literally just brought him up. No. We
Oh,
were
okay.
waiting for you.
Oh, appreciate it.
But
Okay. Also, do you mind if I take notes? Are
Oh,
are
of
y'all
course
for
okay with
not.
that?
sure, for
Yeah, you can.
sure.
I take notes on all my debates. It's just good debate practice, I think.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah,
All right.
especially the ones that get like very technical.
Quick question. Were you in debate like in high school and things of that nature?
I did it in college. I wish I did it in high school, but I had the time of my life doing college debate. It was fantastic. I'd
Awesome.
recommend that anyone does it, especially if like it's like a technical format. You genuinely just learn so much. It's a very useful skill. You can take it to so many different aspects of your life. It's useful not just for like proving your point, but also just for like regular conversation. Like it just makes you sound more concise, like you're saying something.
For
Yeah,
sure.
I
Cool.
did not do any debate in high school or in college, so um, I had to learn the hard way by getting cooked at Thanksgiving dinner.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think it was Ian last time when I left.
Yeah.
You're saying Jordan Peterson's worldview is based on chaos and
Yep.
continue.
Yeah. So Jordan Peterson is all about like order and chaos. That he thinks that you need like some goal, and that's what we're all aiming towards, and that's what gives our lives order. That we order our lives around a goal. That we see the world through like possibilities, but like possibilities like towards or like against a specific goal, and that's how we navigate the world basically. So what Jordan Peterson thinks is that in terms of God, that God just means like the highest mode of being, and that everybody, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter if you're an atheist, everybody is just attempting to like imitate this mode of being. That you have like this high mode of being, and that like this way that you would like to be, and then you're just attempting to be that way. But Jordan Peterson's worldview is susceptible to the same critiques that Jung's worldview is susceptible to. And if you've watched his lectures, then you probably know a lot about like his reliance on Jung. And that's just that like categorically Jordan Peterson is incapable of explaining like Eastern religions. This perspective of like trying to become like the best, greatest person you can be is a very Western concept. I mean, it exists like in Eastern cultures certainly, but when you look to like something like Buddhism, the Buddhist would never describe themselves as attempting to reach like this high mode of being so can become like a better person. What they're trying to do fundamentally is to abolish all categories, including the self. That's how they obtain enlightenment, is by dispelling the illusion that they don't already have it, which is not imitation of any mode of being. Like they explicitly reject modes of being. So I would say that Jordan Peterson is wrong, kind of just on those grounds. But yeah.
Okay. My question would be, as far as the claims that we are all as human beings oriented towards a goal, you disagree with that, or do you believe that there is, or is your critique that it doesn't categorize every religion?
That the specific formulation of the goal that he has in mind, like if he's saying that like everyone desires things, like generally everyone desires things, then I might agree with him that everyone generally desires things. But his specific formulation of it is that everyone desires to be a certain way, that everyone like selects some like high mode of being, like a way that you could be, like a person that you could be, and then you just attempt to like imitate that.
Mm.
That's just like categorically not true for like the Buddhist. The Buddhist isn't trying to imitate any mode of being. In fact, they don't even believe in modes of being. Like the highest Buddhists will literally tell you that the only reason you think the self exists is because you desire it to exist. That there is no like
Mm.
underlying like thing there. And regardless of whether I think that's like kind of silly, but the point is that Jordan Peterson is attempting to describe everybody's religious psychology, and I just don't think that he does that.
I think it's hard to speak in generalities. I think generalities only work to a degree. But you can't describe everybody specifically in a general language or conversation. So I understand your critique there.
Yeah.
So but you said that you had like internal biblical critiques. Like I said, I'm
Yeah.
a Christian. So okay, I'm
Justin, take it
open to hearing
away.
those as well. Okay, for sure.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways you could start. Maybe I'll do a pick your poison. I think there's a couple reasons why the biblical God doesn't make any sense to me. I think first and foremost, I can find in the Bibles all kinds of theological and non-theological contradictions. I can find historical and factual errors. And then it also seems to be that the God of the Bible is like a complete barbarian. Like the way we think of God is that like, he's all good, he's all loving, he's a good father. But then when we read about what he does, it's not indicative of a good father. And then I think
Hmm.
the other thing, which I think for me is always the heaviest stone to lift, is the fact that Jesus didn't fulfill a single prophecy and that the New Testament is continually lying to you about the prophecies he did fulfilled. I
Hmm.
mean, he did fulfill, and they're just like random out of context quotations from the Old Testament. If you're familiar with the Old
Hmm.
Testament prophets, like you can just go back and see what it says about the Messiah and ask yourself, hey, did he do those things? And the reality is that he didn't do any of them.
Hmm. Do you have so what is your belief on what the Bible is? Do you believe that it's just a bunch of malarkey that a bunch of men put together? Do you believe that Jewish religion and tradition actually like maybe was something that was from God and Christianity just kind of like inserted itself there? What's your particular worldview on what the Bible is?
So, I mean, I'm an atheist, so I don't think that any of it came from God. But like, I can
Respect.
see if you're a Jew and you believe that the Hebrew scriptures are inspired by God, I could see why you would still come to the same conclusion that the New Testament is wrong, because just
Hmm.
like a cursory knowledge of the Old Testament would lead you to a very different conclusion than what the New Testament would want you to believe.
Okay, so if I can summarize from what you just said, if you're a Jew and you believe that the Old Testament is inspired, then like it would run you to the conclusion that there are contradictions between the Old Testament, even theologically, and the New Testament theologically.
Yeah, and I'll give you like an obvious one, right? So in the Old
Okay.
Testament, both in like Deuteronomy chapter 30 and Ezekiel chapter 44, we have this idea, in Jeremiah 33 as well, we have this idea that during like the final age, the age to come, the age that everyone's waiting for, this messianic age, that the law of Moses is still going to be enforced, and that includes circumcision. In fact, in Ezekiel 44,
Hmm.
twice, God talks about how the foreigners will even have to be circumcised. But then you get to the New Testament and you get to Paul's writings, and Paul's like, no, 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 you shouldn't seek to take the marks of circumcision. In fact, if you take on circumcision, you take on the whole of the law. And he even says, you
Hmm.
know, if you can be made righteous through the law, then Jesus is of no use to you. So Paul has this
Hmm.
idea that the law was temporary, it needs to be done away with, you should ignore it. He even says that it no longer applies to him as a Jew. But if you read the Old Testament, the law was never said to be temporary. It says over and over again that the law is going to be in enforce forever, for all the days that the Jewish people live on the face of the earth. And so this
Hmm.
to me is a huge problem. And I think the bigger part is that Jesus himself seems to agree with the Old Testament. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, 17 through 19, that the law's not going to pass away until heaven and earth pass away. And
Hmm.
if you teach people to not follow the law, you'll be called least in the kingdom of heaven. So, like, the New
Hmm.
Testament seems to be creating a huge contradiction in like whether or not people should or should not be following the law of Moses.
Hmm. Okay. And so can we like go in on the point of the law, because I believe that even if there are Christians watching, I think that would be a super fruitful. I think this is a super fruitful conversation to be had in general, because I think there's a disconnect between Judaism and Christianity, and I don't think that. I think there's a lot of conversation to be had. Like even in church, we're having conversations about are Christians Jews, or what's going on and what's happening. And so, can we talk about this point, and kind of like the seeming contradiction between like the Old Testament use of the law and the New Testament use of the law?
Yeah, I think that'd be a fruitful conversation. Let's go quickly
So,
to Deuteronomy chapter 30. And in Deuteronomy
okay, for
30,
sure.
this is like the end of closer to the end of God's like blessing and cursings passages about like, hey, this is what's going to happen in the future when you do and don't obey me. And something interesting is said. He says, going down to verse 5, says, the,
Can you give me like 1 second to get there? I'm sorry.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 5. Am I not gonna have to click all of this? Okay. Boom. Let me type it in.
You've probably heard in the New Testament that God is circumcising the heart and no longer the flesh,
Yes.
right? That's Romans 2:29 and others. So there's this idea that during the final age to come, God is going to circumcise not just the flesh but the heart. Um,
Hmm.
and we can touch more on this if we need to. But it first kind of appears in Deuteronomy 30. And Deuteronomy 30, verse 5 says, The Lord your God will bring you into the land that your ancestors possessed, and you will possess it, and he will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. Moreover, the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants, so that you will love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, in order that you may live. And so you may think of this like, oh, well, that's what Jesus did. Jesus came to do that, right? But then the very next
Mm-hmm.
line says, the Lord your God will put all these curses on your enemies and your adversaries who took advantage of you. Then you shall again obey the Lord, observing all of his commandments that I am commanding you today. So clearly in Deuteronomy, they're expecting this period in which God finally circumcises the heart of the people so that they'll be obedient to him. It includes obedience to the law of Moses. It's not
Mm-hmm.
excluding it, right?
Right. And you say Christians today, you say that we don't follow the law of Moses very clearly,
Yeah,
like
you
to the
definitely
T.
don't. Yeah, well, Paul says absolutely
Yeah.
not to. Paul says it's been
Yeah. Yeah.
done
Yeah.
away with. Galatians chapter 3 verse 23, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's the and that would seem to be a problem. I guess how I would answer that is that or at least my particular worldview, and I'm completely open to criticism because I there's one thing I know Ian may be like against the Jordan Peterson, but I do think there's some value in him saying that he tests his worldview against whatever he can, and to produce a more solid worldview. The Bible talks about iron sharpen iron, so I'm far open to critique. But how I view that is that the law, when it's presented to the Israelites in their story, the law is presented to the masses as a form of sin management, right? So if the idea in Christianity, the belief is that God wants a relationship with us, if that is the idea, then providing the law, it definitely serves to, if you're out of right standing with God, to get into right standing with God. But there's something that is there's more than just getting in right standing, right? So it's like it's actually fulfilling the fullness of that relationship. And I believe that the how I view it is that the law does a good job at keeping you in position for you to have a relationship with God. But when Jesus comes in and Jesus teaches us and he's the fulfillment of the law, the fullness of the law, he provides a avenue to further have that relationship, if that makes any sense. So not that it's just sin management, but that we're actually progressing and attaining towards the calling that God has on our lives. So I would ask what critiques you have of that.
Well, I think you brought up Jesus being the fulfillment of the law, and I think that would be probably a good point to bring up Matthew chapter 5. And if you go to
Okay.
17 through 19, Jesus seems to be of the opinion that you should be following the law of Moses. So he says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have
Mm-hmm.
come not to abolish, but to fulfill." So he's saying the law
Mm-hmm.
has not been done away with. He says, "For truly I tell you, until
Yeah.
heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass away from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." So no matter
Mm-hmm.
what you think about Jesus, Jesus is of the opinion that you should be following the law of Moses,
Right.
right? So
Right.
this creates a problem because Paul says the exact opposite. Paul says that the law
Paul
was a
says do
temporary
away with the law.
schoolmaster. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm reading through Romans right now. When I read through Romans, it was, I think, where I get the idea that uh well, I get the idea that, and I'm not going to try to reconcile for anybody. The Bible is the Bible. When I read Romans, I get the idea that the law was one thing. The law by itself leads to death, right? And that Jesus leads to life. I get that, and I also get that Paul's audience was talking to Gentiles who were not under the law, like they were just they weren't they had no association with the Judaism, and there was a lot of argument in the early church as to whether Jews should have, well, I'll say in the early church that the Bible frames, should the Gentiles take on Jewish customs and Jewish and follow the Jewish law, or what should they be doing as far as that goes. And so to Gentiles, and Paul also says, like, to the Gentiles, I become a Gentile, and to the least of these, I become the least of these. I become all things to all men so that I might save a few. So in
Hmm.
maybe talking to the Gentiles, and like I said, I'm not trying to reconcile, but my idea of that is that if he's talking to the Gentiles and he's saying like, oh, in order to follow Jesus, you don't necessarily have to follow all the tenets of the law. Not saying to do away with the law completely, but just to the Gentiles that they don't have to follow the law that was given to the Jews, like the law was given to the Jewish people and the Gentiles were given Jesus. It is an entry to, or a grafting in, if you will, into the tradition, but not necessarily having to be started inside of the Jewish religion, if that makes sense. Like you don't have to become a Jew to become a Christian.
Yeah, so there's a couple issues with the Pauline doctrine. Like what you're suggesting is that the law is still in effect, but only for the Jews, not for the Gentiles. And
Uh, I-
is that what you're saying?
okay, go ahead. Thank you for asking that. I would say that the where I'm at, and then where I'm at on that is that I believe that the law is for the, yes, I would say, and I'm not going to say that the law is not for the Gentiles. I would say that, yeah, go ahead, run with that. Yes, the law's for the Jews, not for the Gentiles. Run with that. Yeah, I would
Right.
appreciate that.
And it's a popular view.
What's
I can
wrong with that?
understand why you would like that. The problem is Paul himself seems to believe that it's not for anyone anymore. Paul says because in the passage you quoted, he says, "To the Jew I became a Jew, and in order to gain Jews, to those under the law I became as one under the law." And then he says, "Though I myself am not under the law, so that I might gain those under the law. To those outside of the law I became as one outside of the law, although I am not outside of God's law, but I am within Christ's law." So what he's suggesting is that he's not actually bound. Paul, the apostle, the Pharisee of Pharisees, was not bound to the law, and he is indeed a Jew. So it seems to me that he's saying that he's not bound by the law either.
Right. Is would you feel like it's a favorable interpretation to say that when he says I'm in Christ's law, that Christ's law has a relation or connection to the law that he gave the Israel, the law that God gave the Israelites, and that him saying he's in Christ's law is him vis-a-vis saying like I'm not under the law as it is today. I'm under the I don't want to say the version of the law, but I am walking in the fullness of the law that Christ has revealed to me, which would be also still him adhering to uh the law.
So
Would you say that's a favorable interpretation? No.
I view Paul's understanding of the law of Christ similar to the book of James. I think they're referring to a new and a different law, more akin to what the book of
Mm-hmm.
John says, where Jesus says, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you." It seems to be that the law of Christ is altogether different from the law of Moses. That's why the book of Hebrews says, the law of Moses brought death, the law of Christ brings life, different things like that. We have this idea that like
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is doing something completely new, completely different, which is why we find in Galatians, because in Galatians chapter 3, Paul seems to be suggesting that the law was given to the Jews but is no longer necessary. It
Mm-hmm.
says, "Now before faith came, we were imprisoned and guarded under the law until faith would be revealed." So he's referring to him and the Jewish people. He's saying we were under the provision of the law until Christ came, which means
Mm-hmm.
those that were once under the law are no longer under the law, which I can only assume means the Jewish people, because theoretically the Gentiles weren't under the law unless they were proselytes. The proselytes would be under the law because it says in Numbers and elsewhere that there's only one law, both for the Jew and for the foreign born
Mm-hmm.
among the children of Israel. And so I think Paul is making the statement that nobody is bound by the law anymore. The law is of no use for you, because
Mm-hmm.
he says in Ephesians, has been done away with. In Ephesians 2 verses 14 and 15, he says the law was hostile. He says, "For he is our peace." Let me put it on the screen for the audience. says he is
Mm-hmm.
our peace. In his flesh he has made us he has made both into one and has broken down the dividing wall that is the hostility between us, abolishing the law with its commandments and ordinances, that he might create in himself a new humanity in peace with the two, thus making peace. So what Paul's saying in Ephesians chapter 2 is that the law has been abolished in the exact
Mm-hmm.
words, which is
Mm-hmm.
the opposite of what Matthew chapter 5 was saying, which is that the law was not abolished.
Yes, and so I guess where how and the odd thing is I'm not seeing the and maybe you can reveal to me if there is a contradiction. I'm not seeing the contradiction, I guess, because I get to the way that I see it, and maybe I can phrase this in a way that would help you find any contradictions that I have. The law of the Old Testament, right, that God gave to the Israelites is a law that is not only covered in the law of Christ, so that it is being continued in a way, but that it's also amplified. So it's covered and amplified, in that all of the laws that were, let's say, because I know there's people that say, oh, there's ceremonial law, there's there's a bunch of different versions of the, not versions but aspects of the law. The way that I see it is that the aspects of the law that were meant to be followed is not only implemented in the law of Christ that Paul talks about, but amplified. Can you help me to see where that's wrong, or where you see a contradiction internally with that?
Well, the contradiction is that three-quarters of
It's
the
not the whole
Bible
law.
says that the law is in force forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got one guy named Paul who comes along and says, no, it's temporary, it's not forever, it's going to be done away with. And then the book of Hebrews agrees. The book of Hebrews says that it was a temporary law. So the question you have to
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself is the law of Moses temporary or is it permanent?
Mm-hmm. The way that, and so I'm not trying to give you like, because I don't want you to be like, oh, this guy's gonna give me the Christian answer. But the way that I see it, the law of Moses, to is it's permanent, but not in the sense that it's permanent. Ah, man, I don't like being that guy. But ultimately, what I'd like to say is that, like, how I see it in my head and how I believe it to be, is that the law of Moses is a shadow, or I like to say shadow, but it's a framework. It's a very, let's say, it is a opaque image of what the law is supposed to be, or what the law of Christ, like, or the law that God gave. It's an opaque image, and Christ comes to give a clear image, which would in fact preserve the actual law of Moses that God was giving, but also like how it, like, if I were to take a picture of something and it's blurred out, and I present a picture of something that's clear, it is still the same image, but there's more detail, and there's more you can gain more information from the clear picture. That's how I
Right,
see it, and
right,
that
but
the
but hold on a
go ahead.
second, Don. I appreciate the thorough answer, but it's not answering the question, right? The
Okay.
question is whether or not people should be following the laws of Moses, the 613 precepts laid
Mm.
out by Moses. Should individuals be following that law?
I'm gonna tap out on that one and say I'm not equipped to answer that particular question. I don't know enough. I'm gonna say I don't know enough to answer that question and answer it to a degree that, not to say that there isn't an answer. I'm just not smart enough at this moment in time. I don't know enough about church history, or um, Judaism, and what all of that. I don't know enough. So I would say I don't know enough not to answer that question right now.
Fair
So I
enough. I
hope that's an
mean,
acceptable answer right now.
Yeah, well, that's always an acceptable answer.
yeah, I don't know is always an acceptable answer. But let me go down a different path. Because to me, I think for some people the Bible contradictions are interesting.
Hmm.
Like to me, I was a Christian even knowing that the Bible had contradictions. I was okay with that. What's your position? Like if the Bible
Right.
contains a
Uh,
contradiction, is it like ground shattering?
For me, no. And it
Right.
also depends on what the quote unquote contradiction would be. If it's a historical contradiction that doesn't necessarily sway me away from the Bible because of what I believe the Bible to be.
Right, exactly. So, for some people, the contradictions are a huge topic and they want to talk about it. I think for me and for you, it's not that big of a deal. You can have a contradiction in the Bible and still, maintain your faith. But I think the more meatier topic is why would we want to believe that Jesus is the Messiah? And before
Hmm.
we read any passages on this, I want you to read a passage with me
Okay.
that you've probably got some familiarity with, even if don't have it on your memory all the time. Um,
Hmm.
but let's go to Hosea chapter 11. We're gonna
All right.
go
Let's do it.
say like verse 1 through 5.
Let me type it up on Bible. You said 1 through 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. 1 through 5. Are you? I'll read it with you, or you want me to read it? How
Well,
you want
I'll
to do?
I'll read it, and let me ask you a question before we start. The easy question: what do you think is like a prophecy? If someone said to you and said, "Well, the Bible contains prophecies about X, Y, and Z," and they said, "Well, I don't even know what a prophecy is," what would you tell them?
I would say that prophecy, from what I've experienced and what I've heard, is one of two things. There are prophecies that actually tell the future, and there are prophecies that just reveal clearly what may be unclear.
Like information,
Yes.
right? Like
So there.
so.
So yes, there's. I guess there's two forms. There's prophecy. I would just kind of define it as it's a vision from God, and that vision can either tell events that are to happen, or it can give you more clarity on an event that has happened, or how something ought to look.
Yeah, or it could bring like just a word of condemnation even. So like when Nathan had to go and chastise David for sleeping with Bathsheba, Nathan the prophet was delivering a prophetic word, even though it wasn't a prediction for the future. I mean, it did include a prediction for the future later, but the prophetic word also just included like, hey, you fucked up, right? So a prophetic word
Yeah.
doesn't always have to be a future prediction, but it is something that is testable, right? When the prophet speaks, you can test what the prophet says,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Now, I want you to read with me Hosea chapter 11, verse 1 and 2. It says, "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. The more I called them, the more they went from me, and they kept sacrificing to the Baals and offering incense to idols." Just on like a plain reading of those two verses, what would you say this is about?
I would say that it would be about when God called like the Israelites out of Egypt. I think this is talking about Deuteronomy. I think it's talking also about the just the journey that the Israelites have had from being called out to be a nation set apart for God, but then also the yeah the let's say the idolatry of the Israelites.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. In fact, it seems to even be hearkening back to Exodus chapter 4, where it says, "Thus saith the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son," and then he's going to free his son from captivity, right? So, this is clearly then, this part of the text is not a prophecy. This is actually a retelling of history, right?
I wouldn't say it's not prophecy. I will say that it's a retelling of history.
How would you think that it's a prophecy?
I mean, like by like my definition of prophecy, and I'm not. I do believe there's an objective meaning of prophecy. Um, I would say prophecy to me, like I said, is a vision from God. It's a vision that reveals something that is not available, not visible to just a plain reading or your common. I would say prophecy is akin to revelation, like a revelation that you would receive from God, and so I would not say that it is. I would not say that this text, because I also believe that I know where you're gonna go from here, but I would not say that this text is exclusively just solely talking about the history of Egypt. Like I
Why?
would say that it is talking about that, but I'm not saying that you can't use it in another way, if that makes sense.
But I'm asking why. Why would any rational human being read this text and think that there's a secret prophecy in here?
Um, I can't answer that. I can't answer that. I can't speak for. I don't attempt to speak for people at large or in general. I will speak for myself because that is my first person experience. So I can tell you, I don't know why somebody would assume that there's a prophecy like, and you're probably gonna go to when Jesus was in Egypt, right? Is that
Hmm.
kind of the okay, for sure. So like for them, for somebody in the for a Jewish person to read this and then like assume like, oh, he's gonna have a person come out of Egypt. Like, okay, I can understand that rationally that may not be a rational position for you to take, unless of course God like shows that to you or reveals that to you. But I would agree that that may not be the most rational statement. To not a rational statement that might I can tell you that's not a rational reading. First glance, only God, something like God would have to reveal that to you at some point. Like, but you wouldn't just literally read it and then see like, oh, there's gonna be somebody that comes. Jesus is gonna come out of Egypt. So I would agree with you on that point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just reading the text, there's no reason to think that this is a prophecy. And the same hermeneutic that Christians are going to apply to this is the same hermeneutic that the followers of Joseph Smith did. The followers of Joseph Smith took passages from the Old Testament that sounded like something Joseph did and said, "Oh, this is actually talking about Joseph Smith." Would you accept that
Hmm.
Joseph Smith fulfilled some prophecies from the Old Testament?
I'm I'm not familiar with that, and that's like Mormons. That's Jesus Christ Latter Day Saints. That's LDS, right?
Hmm.
With Joseph Smith.
Hmm.
Yeah, I will just say I don't necessarily know what Mormons believe. From what I do know, I disagree with them. That's what I would say.
Right.
As far as like that, theologically disagree. So, would I say he fulfilled some Old Testament prophecies? I don't know. I can't answer that one.
But that I guess that kind of cuts to the root of the problem, which is that like the New Testament authors are using a hermeneutic that anyone could use. I've got a whole list of prophecies that I assembled, like when you read them, or verses from the Old Testament, and when you read them, they sound like they're about me. But you wouldn't accept that these
Hmm.
verses are talking about me, would you?
No, and I
Right?
think that I would also, and that's a great point. I'll also say with I believe me personally, this is not my, I'm not critiquing anybody, but I believe that there are other religious groups that do take verses out of the Bible or out of the Old Testament and apply it to themselves. I won't say any groups, but I do. I'm completely aware of those people. Yes.
Right. So like if you wouldn't accept me doing it and you wouldn't accept Joseph Smith doing it, why would we accept people doing it about Jesus?
Um, I think the largest argument for that is that Jesus. It's claimed that he. I'm not gonna. I believe it. I believe that Jesus was raised from the dead. He raised himself. That he gave his life and that he raised himself from the dead. So if that is the truth, then yeah, I would say that people can take this and say, hey, I can see the hey, I think it's fun, and I'm paraphrasing a large amount here, but I think it's funny that this guy he's supposed to be the king of the Jews, and he's claiming to be God's son, and he's coming from Egypt. He's coming out of Egypt in this particular thing, and God did call his son out of Egypt. He did it before. I think they are pulling on the fact that faith wise, if you believe that God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore, that God would operate in the same way when he's doing a deliverance. And Jesus' deliverance, the Exodus that we quote unquote see, would be of humanity from sin, as Moses' Exodus was Israel, which would also symbolize the humanity that God has chosen out of the larger human population, which is sin. So there's that I can see correlations in how people would do that, especially early Christians.
Well, I don't think the correlation is good because the son that gets called out of Egypt in Hosea 11 is bad and it sacrifices to idols.
Okay.
And so, like, it's not a great correlation.
Okay. Well, it's not a one to one for sure.
Oh,
It's
certainly
for
not
sure
a
not
one
a
to
one-to-one.
one.
And that's why I think they didn't quote the rest of it.
You got
But
it. That's exactly why they didn't quote the
yeah,
whole thing, right? Don't quote the part
yeah, that's
that
why they didn't
goes
quote.
against
Yeah.
our position.
Oh, for sure. But I don't think, and I can see the critique that you would have of like cherry picking. I can see that being a thing. But I could also say that it could be true that what Moses did was a miracle for what Moses did, and God Himself calling God's children out of Israel, which was tyrannical at the time, was a miracle. And I believe that those people, those Christians at the beginning, the people that were writing about Jesus, saw that same miracle in that aspect, that just as God called, and maybe Hosea 11, 1 through 2 was literally just saying like, oh, this scripture perfectly encapsulates what God did through Moses, and that God is going to do the same thing through Jesus, which He did.
Well, I don't think that's a one-to-one comparison. I think that's wishful thinking because
Okay.
Egypt is a physical land and a physical place. To
Mm.
make it anything other than a physical people leaving a physical place, you're engaging in like a lot of subjective art. You're saying, well, if I say that these words mean something different, they can mean anything. I could say, shit, that it's about my son. My son's actually Egyptian. I could say it's about me and my son. I called my son out of Egypt.
I would have to disagree with you, because I think that from a biblical lens, like the Israelites are not just people, they are God's people. And so I
Yeah,
would have to disagree with you that it's just people leaving people. It's God's people that He's choosing out of the masses, right? It's a select group of people that are God's people that He's choosing.
but
And
you've already
so
told me that the
from a
context
biblical
doesn't matter
worldview, go
anymore.
ahead.
But you already told me the
You
context
said
doesn't
what?
matter. You already told me the context doesn't matter anymore. The context of Isaiah of Hosea chapter 11
What
verse
do you
1
mean?
is no longer relevant.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
Like, I
once
said the context. I said the context doesn't matter. Did I said that, or are you saying that that's essentially what I'm saying in
That's
in
essentially
thought?
what you're saying. You're saying if it's is actually a secret prophecy about Jesus coming out of Israel or coming out of Egypt, it's not actually about a physical people or a physical land. You're just saying that well, the context of the original prophecy is no longer important. It's not about an actual people group. It's not about an actual land. So I could do the same thing. I could say, listen, the
Mm,
original
mm.
context of Hosea 11 isn't important to me either. It's now about me and my Egyptian son.
Well, I'm not saying so, and let me thank you. I'm glad you said that. I'm not saying that the context doesn't matter. I think they chose this. If I can clarify what I'm saying, I believe they chose this specific one, not about the people and what the people are doing, but to indicate an action of God that He's done. Like I said, like, and I said this, that God's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. If I believe that God is the same yesterday, today, and He doesn't change, then I can expect that God is going to move and act in the same ways that He's done in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. And so where would be my evidence for that? Well, God pulled His people He pulled His holy people that He set apart out of a group of people, like out of humanity in general. He did that here, and Hosea just kind of encapsulates that, right? And so Jesus is doing the same thing. I'm going to point to you guys, the writers of the Bible. Jesus is doing the same thing. I'm going to draw that correlation that just as God pulled the Israelites out of the Egyptians, He's going to pull the Christians out of the sinners, if you will. And you can say that that's you can say that's a mental jump. To me, that makes sense. And I would you would have to point out the contradiction for me to understand where my contradiction is.
Well, it doesn't have to be a contradiction. You're just engaging in poetry now. You're saying these words can mean something
Okay.
similar. Like these words don't need to be tied to the original context. These words don't need to be tied to the original event. I can just do an artistic rendering about something that sounds similar, but I can engage in the same practice. I can say,
Hmm.
listen, these words are actually about me and my Egyptian son. You see,
Okay.
what I'm
Okay. Go
suggesting is
ahead.
that the hermeneutic that you're practicing can be done by anybody and about any
For
number of
sure.
different things. The minute you divorce the interpretation of the passage from the grammar and from the context, it's subjective. You can make it about anything you want it to be.
I would agree. And anybody can pick up a Bible and do this. That doesn't mean it's going to be true. I would say that the next the and I'm saying this in the sense that Jesus says that a lot of people are going to do this anyways, a lot of false prophets, but you'll know them by their fruit. So anybody can do this, right? And there's a lot of people that do this already. There's a lot of people that do this automatically, but the fruit with the actual, let's say the result of that action may not be what you intended to be. For example, you can say, "Oh, this is talking about me and my son," right? That's totally fine for you to say that. That doesn't mean that and you can like whatever action that should follow. If that doesn't happen, then that doesn't then you can say whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Like it's like saying so. For example, I will give Jesus as an example. You can say it's about you and your son. We can say that these people they're practicing a poetic hermeneutic about Jesus, but then the action of him resurrecting on the cross would then show, hey, they're right because and
Well, I don't think
everybody
so.
comes back to you said what?
No, Jesus, even if Jesus resurrected, it wouldn't make this a prophecy. So this is where
It
it's
wouldn't
very
make it
important
a
to
okay.
recognize that what the gospel authors are saying is not always what Jesus is saying. Now, that being said, shit, Jesus could have talked about these prophecies, saying that they were about him. We don't know that to be the case. All we know is that the
Mm,
gospel authors were looking for reasons to claim that Jesus was the Messiah, and this is one of the things that they claimed pointed to Jesus' messiahship. Now, that being said, I
mm,
have no reason to believe that Jesus ever raised from the dead. And even if Jesus did raise
okay.
from the dead, I wouldn't accept a bad hermeneutic. I would never accept secret prophecies in the Old Testament where they clearly don't exist, especially when we have clear prophecies about the Messiah that he absolutely did not fulfill, right? So the New Testament authors want you to
Mm,
believe that there are like 29 different prophecies Jesus fulfilled, even though most of them aren't even prophecies. And the ones that are prophecies he actually didn't fulfill, like Zechariah 9
mm,
9, Micah 5 2. He didn't fulfill those prophecies. That being
okay.
said, Jesus rising from the dead doesn't make a contradiction a non contradiction. That's ridiculous. But I also have no
I
reason to believe that Jesus raised from
okay.
the dead.
Okay, and that is so the Jesus raising from the dead is a different conversation entirely. And I also believe that that's gonna be that's literally the crux of the faith. And if you say you were a Christian and now you're not, like that's probably a very huge thing. So I'm also I'm not gonna attempt to make you believe that he raised from the dead. That's gonna be of your own personal journey on if you go one way or another, or if you stay this way, and that's totally fine. I guess what I'm saying is that if someone is able to defy laws that we are put in place, or if they're able to defy something that is undefiable, then I think that we can either write that off as a one-off and say, "Oh yeah, it just happened. Like it's just, yeah, everybody dies except him," and we just boom, that's cool. Or we maybe need to try to redefine what we've classified as undefiable, right? Because we don't know everything. It's not possible for one human being to know everything, and the whole endeavor of science is to continue to discover, which means that as long as there's something out there to discover, that we're gonna continue to research it. And I believe that science is also trying to really what's it called? Really well define the roles that or not the roles, but well define how the world works. And I feel like if somebody is able to transcend that, then the things that we consider to be a you can say a bad hermeneutic, and that's possible to say. But I do believe that it calls for us to maybe redefine what we would consider good and bad if they were able to do it. If this person has claimed to be God, he was crucified for being God and he raised from the dead. If that is true, then maybe we need to think about in a different way, in a different light, how we were seeing certain things.
I think the reality is, if Jesus is God, why wouldn't he be able to point to clear prophecies that are not
Hmm.
subjective and disconnected from the original context? And why is he not able to go into the Old Testament and show us that what he did was actually predicted? It wasn't a type or a shadow. You didn't
Hmm.
have to go into a non-prophecy and try to turn it into a prophecy. If Jesus is God,
Hmm.
I would expect that he would be clearly written about in the Old Testament, but he wasn't written about in the Old Testament. So To me,
Mm,
the fact that this God man is unable to correctly connect his life with the Hebrew scriptures is the best evidence that he didn't rise from the dead and that it is just mythology and that it's all a lie. And I would say he didn't rise from the dead for the same reason that you believe Vespasian didn't heal a blind man or a guy with a lame leg using the power of Serapis.
okay, I'm getting some echoes here. Can you hear me?
We
What
lost
about
you.
you? Can you hear me?
Ooh,
Your connection
it's
turned
like,
robotic on us.
ye-
Yeah, bad connection. I'm having bad
it's
connection.
like the audio is like literally unlistenable too.
Yeah, the audio's. Let me see if I can refresh it. Yeah, your connection got really choppy.
Yeah, that becomes what it becomes. Can you hear me?
Not really. Like we can hear you, but it
Yeah.
sounds like you're in outer space and talking like a robot.
All right. That's unfortunate. That is unfortunate. That is super unfortunate. Um, is there? If I can't talk, then they can't hear me.
Yeah,
Uh,
unfortunately, no one can really make out what you're saying. Like we can kind of hear you, but it's really difficult. But anyways, we spent a good time talking, and we appreciate the good conversation.
Yeah,
Come back anytime, and we can do like a round number two. We can have a discussion about anything you want to.
yeah, I'd love to.
All right, cheers, friend. Well, he's nice enough.
Yeah, he was certainly.
He was definitely more palatable than the average Christian apologist, I would say.
Yeah, of course. I think like the most underutilized phrase among apologists, but I mean probably just among everyone is, just to say I don't know, or to like at least like acknowledge when you're being biased. I don't know. I think that that's nice. I think it's like refreshing to hear someone say, well, I just don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. It's still painful to hear them do, like, to watch them do the pretzeling, like with the bad
Yeah.
apologetic or the bad reading of the Hebrew scriptures. We're like, well, I mean, I have to accept this bad hermeneutic because Jesus rose from
Yeah.
the dead. Well, I think
Yeah.
the fact that it's a bad hermeneutic should tell you that he didn't rise from the dead because God wouldn't
Yeah.
be asking you to accept bad hermeneutics.
Yeah, it's like God is like calling audibles like midway through.
Yeah, basically. So we've got Giraffe in the box with us. How you doing, Giraffe?
I'm doing pretty good. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear
Yeah.
you.
All right. So I guess before we continue, I just want to, make sure we're all on the same page here. So the statement on screen is God isn't real. So I just want to make sure I understand what's implied by that. So is that a statement that Abrahamic religions are not correct, no religion is correct, or is it a statement of fact that a god or deity could not exist, or is it a general hypothesis that a god or deity could not exist?
So, I guess there's like a lot of different approaches. It probably depends on the property set. I'm inclined to believe like every property set of every god I've ever heard about, that god can't exist. I have some good reasons. So when we say God, what we mean like foundationally, if nothing else, is like a mind that created the universe. And I'm fairly confident that a mind that created the universe doesn't exist. So much so that I would say that it's like a belief.
So is are you saying that's a statement of fact that you're proposing, or are you saying that that's your hypothesis?
Not sure. Like, could you differentiate those for me?
So a hypothesis being a statement that is testable. So you could perform an experimentation or some type of test to either prove or disprove your hypothesis, whereas a statement of fact would be a statement that is factual based on the axioms of the system that you're operating in.
Oh, I'd probably say that it's like a statement of fact that I would motivate it like philosophically.
Philosophically. All right. So personally, I don't think any religion or God that has been described is accurate or is correct. So I would agree with you there. Um, but I do have to ask. So a mind that created the universe, what properties would you attribute to that, or would you
So
say would be required?
Yeah, so for a mind that created the universe, the way that it would have created the universe would have been through like some sort of like mental act, like an act of will, for example. But one of the properties of time is that time is dependent on the universe, right? Like we live in a space-time manifold, and that is the universe. So if we have time, then we have the universe necessarily. Space-time is one of the fields, and the universe is the field-bearing manifold. So the existence of the universe is just going to be prior. So if the universe hasn't been created, then there is no time, which means that by necessity, God must exist outside of time. If he exists outside of time, things that exist outside of time don't have past states and they don't have future states because all these things require time. So if that's the case, God only has one eternal present state. So either God is eternally willing the universe into existence, in which case the universe eternally exists. Because if God wills something into existence, then it exists. But that contradicts God willing it into existence, because if it always existed, then it never came into existence, which means that God couldn't have possibly been eternally willing it into existence. But the alternative is that God would have had to change. He would have had to go from not willing it into existence to willing it into existence. And if that's the case, then God changes, which would contradict him being outside of time. So just on that basis, I'd probably say that a mind that created the universe can't exist.
I feel like there's a flaw in that though. You're assuming that anything outside of the universe has to exist outside of time.
Yeah.
That's an exclusivity of a property to our universe that we can't really speak to anything outside of our universe. There could be multiple universes. It could be a nested universe. So, like for example, there could be a universe that we are within, and that universe itself has its own time. Just how we can create a simulation with an AI, albeit not conscious currently, but we can create a simulation and put an AI into its own universe, and it has its own flow of time. And you're saying that based on our observations within our universe, that a mind that created this universe has to be outside of time. I don't feel like there's anything to really show that.
Well, yeah, just that we know what time is. Time is one of the fields in the field-bearing manifold, so time is necessarily dependent on our universe. Additionally, if there's like some sort of time that's outside of our universe, if God exists in God time, then the same argument would just run exactly identical to God time. So God can't possibly be the source of God time.
Well, I didn't say God has to be the source of God time. I'm just saying you're implying that anything outside of our universe has to be outside of time. I mean, I get that it would be outside of our time, or at least our understanding of time within our universe. But I feel like we can't necessarily speak to anything outside of our universe.
So for God time, presumably God is just the creator of everything, but God wouldn't be the creator of God time, so then we could just derive the contradiction there.
So I understand that, and I get that it could continue up. But does that necessarily make that particular God, right, the one that created our universe, would that necessarily make them not a God? Would you say that a property of a God is the creator of our universe, or would it have to be a creator of every possible universe?
Just like the source of everything, presumably. Like a mind that sourced everything.
I
But
feel like that's far beyond our potential understanding. I feel like that's neither provable nor disprovable. I would
but it
say
is.
if you wanted to define God as the creator of our universe and everything we understand, I can just go back to the simulation argument, right? Where we didn't create this universe, we didn't create time, but assuming we in the future develop enough, computing capability, we could create, a universe within a simulation and be the God of that universe.
So the problem is that if God's the source of everything and God time exists, then God couldn't possibly be the source of God time. So we can't have a mind that's the source of everything, the creator of everything, if God couldn't have created God time for the exact same reason why God couldn't have created the universe, right? Like, however many steps up there are in time, like however many different times there are, there's whichever one's the highest, God couldn't have created it because prior to the creation, he would have been outside of it, which means that he wouldn't have had any future states. So either he was always willing it, in which case it would just always exist, which would be a contradiction, or he would have to change, which means that he would need to be within that time, which would be a contradiction.
So you're saying that time can't exist outside of the universe? Is what I'm gathering from that?
So time could exist, it's just that God couldn't create it.
Why would he have to?
If God's the source of everything, then by definition, he would have to be the creator of everything.
But who's to say time is created? Couldn't it just be there?
Then God wouldn't be the source of everything.
But you're including time in everything. But do we necessarily have to?
Well, I think
time-
that's the
time is a
definition of
concept.
everything.
Sorry, Justin, what did you say?
I said the definition of everything includes all things. Once you eliminate something from everything, it's not everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but time is just a concept created by us. We don't even fully understand it. I mean, why does time as a property of the universe have to be included in, quote, everything?
It's like I'm not sure I understand the question, right? It's like a thing that exists, so presumably it would be in everything.
So time, as I understand it, is just the progression of events in the universe, and it's kind of something that's an observer phenomenon. If there were no observers, I mean, you couldn't really speak to time in the first place. So I guess what I'm getting at would be time is more of a... How would I describe it? It's more of a... Like, it's not a physical thing, time. It's just a way that our universe
exist?
works.
Yeah.
In what way? Like, does time happen? Is that what you're asking?
You're saying it's like the progression of events. Does the progression of events exist?
Well, what is existing? That's what I'm getting at with
just
that
like
question.
being in reality. Like it's a pretty primitive property. I'm not sure there's any way to describe existence other than like giving a bunch of synonyms for it.
Well, I would say time as a progression of events, the way I understand it and perceive it as a human being, I would say it exists. I would also say that there's no reason for me to suggest that has to exist outside of our universe or that it doesn't.
So the problem is that either way there's going to be a contradiction. So if it does exist, if there's like some higher order time, like some higher order progression of events in existence or whatever, then the same argument is going to work exactly the same. Either God is the source of it, or he's not. If God isn't the source of it, then he's not the source of everything. Therefore, if God exists, then he necessarily is the source of time. But God can't be the source of time because prior to creating time, he would either need to be always willing it into existence, in which case it would just always exist, which contradicts the property of God creating it, because if something always existed, then it doesn't have a creator. I forgot the second half of the double bind. So the first half was God always wills it. Okay, sure. The second half is that God was not always willing it, which means that God would have to progress in his state prior to the progression of existence existing, which would be a contradiction. So either way, no matter how you slice it, there's going to be a contradiction with God willing time into existence.
But that's assuming that time has to be created.
Then God.
Well, what if
time? What
if time's just always been there?
Then what you would be holding to is like a demiurge type theory, like some things existed and then God just like used the things that existed to like morph it into like the world. So that wouldn't be God, like in a theistic sense. That would more be like a demiurge, like what Plato or like Aristotle believed in. And I don't have the defeater to that per se, but what I do have is just like at that point I would probably just switch to like an abductive argument, like an inference to the best explanation, where it doesn't really seem like this explains anything. And if it doesn't explain anything, then I'm like via Occam's razor, I'm just not going to believe it.
Well, I can understand the Occam's razor argument. I guess what I'm getting at is, that you're proposing that God isn't real as a statement of fact,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, other than philosophical arguments, it doesn't seem like there's any test or experiment or evidence that can prove or disprove this statement of fact. So therefore,
Yeah.
I take it as not a statement of fact. I take it as an unfalsifiable hypothesis.
That doesn't follow, right? Just because it's not like scientific doesn't mean that there's like no truth to it, right? Science doesn't study philosophy. There's like certain issues that are purely philosophical in nature. And I think that philosophy can give us conclusions about those. Science is really good at telling us facts about like the natural world. But when it comes to like metaphysics, I don't think that science really has any business there, absent like certain circumstances where you're drawing on scientific considerations to arrive at like a conclusion, like metaphysical conclusions. But insofar as the argument against God being the creator of time, if that argument goes through, then we just come to the conclusion that God doesn't exist there. And we could say like possibly the demiurge exists, and I might agree with you. Possibly the demiurge exists. I just don't think that that's just a bit beyond the scope of the conversation at that point.
I mean, I agree. I guess what I'm getting at is if you can't say for sure whether or not the demiurge exists, then like, so what's the point of saying, God isn't real if it's
Because the
untestable
demiurge
or
isn't God.
unprovable?
God isn't the demiurge. There are two different. So, like a demiurgist is not a theist. A theist is not a demiurgist. They're like two separate beliefs. And I'm not like a demiurgist. I don't think that there's any evidence for it. I think there's like good considerations against it. But the claim that I think that we can like for sure certainly know is that God doesn't exist. Whether or not like a demiurge exists, well, that's just kind of beyond the scope of the discussion. I think it's possible a demiurge exists. I just don't have a reason to think that one does.
Okay, well then let's just stick to the claim of God as you see it. So what is the proof that no God exists, right? As a creator of everything, as you stated.
Yep. I feel like I've given it. So the proof again is just that God can't be the source of whatever the highest layer of time is, right? So we have our universe time, but then if the theist wants to hold like God time, God also can't be the source of God time, because either God was always willing God time into existence, in which case it would have always existed, which contradicts him bringing it into existence, so he's not the source of everything, or he was not always willing God time into existence, in which case he would need to progress to a future state. But if he's outside of all forms of time, then that means that he doesn't have future states, which means that there would be just a contradiction there. So God can't possibly be the source of God time.
What if there is no time external to him and the time is within him? What if he created it at the time he created himself?
So God would just be the progression of existence?
Could be.
I don't know how to make sense of that claim, right? Like this to me is like saying like what if God is the number 3?
It's hard to make
sense. I just don't really know what that means.
It's just hard to make sense of anything that would be outside of our universe, right? So you're applying the logic of time and the progression of existence and the progression of events. You're applying that to something outside of our universe. You're speaking to something that is you're speaking to something foreign to us based on non-foreign experiences.
Maybe, but I guess I just don't know. Like, if the claim is like, well, what if God is time? I just have no idea what that means, right? Like, he's like identical to time.
Okay, let me rephrase it in a way that I guess makes more sense. So, like, imagine there's a God outside of our universe, right? So you're saying that the space outside of our universe where this God exists, there's this contradiction where if time does exist, he didn't create the time, or if he did create the time, I think you explain it better. I'm not familiar with that the double bind as you described.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like kind of an original argument. But yeah.
So, what if the space outside of the universe where this God exists, there isn't time? The time that God operates on is within that God. That time is part of that God. Right, and it was created when he was created.
That seems to be. Oh wait, God is created?
Possibly.
Then we have. Then we would conclude that God doesn't exist on the grounds that he was created, which means he's not the source of everything.
If he created himself,
I would take that as a contradiction. I think causes precede their effects.
But
So,
that's within our universe with our understanding of time. We're talking about something outside of our universe where we're not quite sure how cause and effect relate to each other. And
so
also, I described that this space outside of our universe where this God exists, there is no time. That the time would be intrinsic to that God or deity or whatever, right?
okay. So maybe the way that I would describe the fault with that would be so on this view, would God exist within time? Like, would he exist within his like God time that he's also the source of? Because if that's the case, then it kind of seems like he exists within himself, and I don't think that that is. I think that that is like contradictory.
I'm not quite sure how it's contradictory.
Because you would just have like an ontological circle. So, in order for God to exist, if God exists in time and God also is time, then God needs to exist for him to exist. So, God would need to exist for time to exist, and time needs to exist for God to exist. So, God needs to exist for him to exist. So, prior to God's existence, God must exist. So it just seems like there's like a devastating like bootstrapping problem where you can't really get the ball rolling because in order for God to exist, first he must exist.
I mean, again, I feel like that's really hinging on the idea that cause precedes effect outside of our universe, where we have nothing to show that that's how it should happen.
So that's not even necessarily like a cause and effect claim. It's more of like a grounding claim. It's a claim about like this thing exists in virtue of this thing. So if one of God's properties is that he exists within time and another of God's properties is that he is time, then he would need to exist within himself. Like in order for God to exist, time would need to exist. And in order for time to exist, God would need to exist. So prior to God existing, God would need to exist. But if God doesn't exist yet, then that condition just isn't met. So,
Okay, do you believe in the Big
and I
Bang?
suppose, right, like, I think kind of what you're gesturing at is that, like, maybe God is illogical. And if God's illogical, I'm just not going to believe in him.
Well, I'm not necessarily asking you to believe in a God. I'm asking, what is the purpose of not believing in a God?
If it's illogical, then the purpose of not believing in it is to remain logical, right? If we want to believe true things, then we need to undergo a logical thought process.
So you're saying that something that's illogical can't be true?
Yeah, by definition, or at least just that it can't be inferred.
One moment here. I had something on that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ian. Like, if it's illogical, I don't see why we would want to believe in it. Like, you don't believe that illogical things exist, do you?
It depends on what we're talking about. I had something on that here somewhere. I think
Well,
it was.
like, you don't believe you can break the three classical laws of logic, right?
No,
Oh.
I do not.
So that's what we're referring to. When something's illogical, it's violating, like, the laws of logic. We're not just saying that it's, like, unintuitive. We're saying it literally breaks the law of
Yeah.
logic.
Yeah, right. Like, I'm not going to believe that, like, the existent square circle exists.
Wait, what was that last thing you said?
I'm not going to believe that, like, the existent square circle exists.
That's a fair statement.
Likewise, if God entails, like, some sort of contradiction, I'm just not going to believe that he exists. Like, I would take that. So if the problem is that if God exists outside of logic, then logic itself doesn't exist. Logic is the rules that govern valid inference. If you start with true premises and you follow a valid inference rule, then you will arrive at a true conclusion. So if we can start with true premises and arrive at the conclusion through a valid inference rule that God doesn't exist, then that means the conclusion that God doesn't exist is also true, because the laws of logic are truth preserving. You start with true premises, you'll end up with a true conclusion. But if God does exist, even though we've validly inferred that he doesn't, then that just means that the laws of logic don't work. So like at that point, like logic just doesn't exist.
I guess if we're going based off of like, I guess the strict definition of logic with the three laws of logic, I wouldn't necessarily say that the God that I proposed or that could possibly exist has to be illogical. That I'm assuming we're going based off of the second one, which is the law of non-contradiction. It can't be both true and false at the same time.
Yeah, in this instance, yeah. Although I do also invoke like the law of excluded middle a number of times to set up like dilemmas about like either this is true or this is true.
Okay, fair enough. I'll stick to the second one for what I'm saying here. There's no real reason to impose our understanding of contradiction within our universe and the laws of time and the laws of physics and what we know to be a contradiction. There's no reason to impose that on something outside of our universe, beyond our current understanding.
I think there is, right? I think I don't think that a contradiction is like the type of thing that we're still learning new things about. I think that a contradiction is just like a specific I want to avoid like technical jargon, but it's like a specific concept. It's a partition in our logical space. So I think we know what a contradiction is. I think that what a contradiction is has stayed exactly the same. In fact, I think that like a proposition and its negation being false, or just like a proposition and its negation, like we could call it like a schmontradiction if we want. This thing can't exist. It leads to what's called the principle of explosion, and then we just conclude that everything is true.
Okay, well, let's go at it a different way then. You do believe in the Big Bang as the origins of our universe?
Not the origins. I think that it's very plausible that the universe existed like far prior to that. In fact, I kind of lean towards the universe always existing.
You lean towards the universe always existing.
I do believe that the Big Bang happened. I just don't think it's like the source of the universe.
So you don't believe the universe was created then?
Yeah.
So the universe has always existed.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily seem logical, though.
Why not?
Maybe I'm not fully understanding, the laws of logic, but something always existing. I mean, isn't that the same problem with God always existing in order to create time?
No, because if it were the case that like the container itself always existed, like time itself just always existed, then that means that nothing would have needed to create it. Like the time doesn't exist within time. There's like the overarching container, like the space-time manifold, and then like matter and energy, etc., exist within it.
Right, based on our current understanding.
Yeah, although I would say that this is just like a model for how the universe could be. There's data to support this model, but it's not like
Yes.
there isn't like some smoking gun evidence that this is in fact the case. Although there is data to support it.
But would you say we have a good description of what time is and how it works?
For our universe, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
so
there's like weirdness with it, but yeah, we have a pretty good understanding at least.
all right. I don't feel like this is going anywhere. I feel like it's just a statement that a God that created everything couldn't exist, and I don't really have a way to address that. As I said, I feel like things outside of the universe you can't really speak to because it would be fundamentally different to like everything that we base our understanding on. All of our philosophy, the laws of logic, it's all derived within our universe and based off of our observations. So I feel like none of these things would necessarily apply when discussing things outside of the universe.
I don't know. I think that there's like some contentious like philosophical claims there. A lot of people would hold that the laws of logic are transcendental, or that like certain like mathematical things are not arrived at empirically, but are rather arrived at like purely a priori. That even if like nothing existed, it would still be true that 1 + 1 is 2.
Yes.
But I don't. I think that that's probably just an open question in philosophy. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've already responded to
Yeah.
the overarching, but so it seems like we might just be going in circles. Do you have anything else? Otherwise, I super
Not
appreciate
really,
you coming
other
up here.
than
I thought it was a fascinating conversation.
yeah, I appreciate it as well. I mean, not really anything else other than just, wrapping up. I would say that I kind of agree for the most part with the idea that a God that created every possible thing that you could describe, so like time outside the universe, stuff like that, that's a bit of a stretch to exist. And I would kind of agree with you there. But I would say like a more fundamental explanation of a God as just a creator can't really be disproven. Um, and I didn't really get a chance to expand on that, but
Oh, I mean,
that
do you want to expand on that? Like,
I mean, we could if you would like to.
sure, yeah. What's why?
Well, I
I mean,
feel
I
like
guess.
I
How
was
do I
gonna say I
want to
feel like
approach this?
oftentimes a creator is, at least in modern religions, is described as omnipresent or omniscient or omnipotent, but I I propose the idea that a creator doesn't have to be any of those to create something. You don't have to be omniscient or omnipotent or omnipresent. And without
I
those
agree.
traits, I mean, could you disprove a creator without attacking one of those traits?
Yeah, yeah. I think that my argument that I use against God, um, I don't know. I think my argument doesn't invoke any of those traits.
So just simply the creator of our universe, right? And this is
My
assuming that
like through a
maybe,
mental act. Yeah.
yeah, and this is assuming that that creator might not be the original creator or the creator of himself, just a creator of our universe, right? I guess that's the demiurge thing again.
Yeah. So I can't necessarily disprove like a creator of. I think that there's like niche models that you could appeal to that would get around it, but at that point, it's just not God, right? Like, if because what the theist wants to say is that God is like the first mover, God is the source of everything. Everything other than himself, God made it. And at that point, I think that the logic just necessitates that you no longer have that.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, what if God just always existed, like you said, the universe did?
Oh, I can grant that God always existed, but then it runs into like the same argument, right? Like if God was eternally willing the universe into existence, then the universe would just eternally exist, which would be a contradiction of it coming into existence.
So define coming into existence then.
Yeah, just that there's like a point prior to which it didn't exist and after which it does exist.
I mean, does there have to be a point for it to be created?
I think so.
I mean, is there something wrong with the idea of an eternal God eternally willing it into existence?
That just means the universe is eternal, which means that it wasn't really created.
Right. So, like, my understanding is like if you are going to concede that the universe could be eternal, then I guess I don't see why it would need to be created because that would contradict the idea of it being eternal. If it's eternal, then definitionally speaking, it's uncreated.
Yeah.
What if it's like a Mobius strip, right? Like, so
I'm
time.
not sure what that
Well, what
means.
if time is like a loop, right? That we can't really see on our scales. So you're saying that it's eternal, but what if it's like one big loop? So
Could be.
maybe God created it outside of that, right? Like I can create a Mobius strip, and assuming there's like a small creature on it, it would appear endless in any direction. It would appear continuous, but I could create that from an external perspective.
But then the problem is that even if like even in the creation, you would need to create it from God time, and God time, you would run into the same problem with
Yeah,
God
we
time.
we talked about that earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So that would
Fair
probably be
enough.
my like general objection to it. I don't know. I think that that's probably like these sorts of arguments like that model for God is definitely like a trickier one. I think that it's like probably more defensible than like any of the Abrahamic faiths. I
Oh
think
yeah, I
that
agree.
like the God exists outside of time stuff is like gibberish. I think it's completely indefensible. But I think that there probably are still arguments against like the God time stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I do have to agree. I'm not a big fan of the Abrahamic religions. Pretty violent stories,
Yeah,
some
for
violent
sure.
people.
Yeah.
some real violent people. A lot of contradictions. Doesn't really make sense. I mean, I went to church as a child, and I was not convinced.
Yeah,
So
listen, me too. Yeah, that's where I
yeah,
was
very
at.
early on, I was like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think
Specifically,
as
like the omnipotent and omniscient
Right.
stuff. It's like if God knows everything and there's like evil stuff happening, like God's
yeah,
kind of rude.
yeah, exactly, right. Like that's it just doesn't make so there's like a lot like problem of evil stuff goes deep, but I think the argument is like just true, right? Like there's some evils that just can't be explained. I don't think that anyone has an explanation for like kids with cancer. Like
No.
I think that that's just like I've never heard an explanation that doesn't sound like completely crazy.
Right. Let me ask you a question though, Giraffe, since we got you on, and you've been with us for a while. I don't want David to lose hope that he's going to get in, but I want to ask you a question before you leave, which is it sounds like you don't really believe in the traditional God models, which is fine. So like I would ask like the God concept you might have in your head, like what's its purpose? What's the goal? Is there a benefit for believing in this thing?
Pursuit of knowledge. So I guess I wouldn't say I have a specific concept in my mind of what God is. I'm more so just open to the idea that there might be things outside of this universe that aren't currently understandable and hopefully at some point would be understandable. I guess I just don't like to rule things out without sufficient evidence, and I that's why I wanted to come on, is just like the whole God isn't real as a statement. I felt like it wasn't necessarily disprovable scientifically, but
Oh,
again, a
I would
lot
agree
of
with
it's
you
like
on that.
philosophically and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that it's the place of science to rule out God's existence. Although certainly you can make arguments against God's existence using that like draw on like bits of science.
I
But
would
I
hope
mean
that
I
if there
certainly
isn't a
agree.
God, that science at one point could rule that out. I guess
I
that would be my hope.
I guess I don't know how it could. I don't think that it's particularly testable. Maybe perhaps if it was proven that the universe always existed, that would rule it out.
Or if we found a way to exit the universe and re-enter it to observe things outside of the universe, maybe that would disprove it.
I'm not sure, right? Because what the dimension that God would exist in is like the metaphysical dimension, and that just seems to be like strictly the domain of philosophy.
Also,
So
I
I'm not sure.
yeah, I agree, and I don't know what it means to be outside of the universe. My understanding is like if we found a way to get outside of the universe, that would just be a part of the universe. Like the universe to me is just like everything that exists.
As far as we know, yeah, but there's a lot of different theories on that. There could be like nested universes. It could be, nested simulations. There could be a bunch of universes all, bumping up against each other. There's a bunch of different theories on, whether or not this is the only universe or if there is a multiverse.
Hmm.
There's a lot of different talk on that.
Yeah.
Again, a lot which we don't really have anything to support any of that really. But I guess to not to draw it on too much, but to answer your question, I guess Destruction Zone. I forgot your actual name,
It's Justin.
Justin. To answer your question, I don't necessarily have like a specific outline of what God is. I'm mainly, I'm just in pursuit of knowledge, and I just wanted to talk about, I guess, the specific statement here and whether or not that hinders our pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah, certainly. I don't know. I think that that's like a noble pursuit. I don't know. You're certainly a very critical thinker, more so than most people that I talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Anyways,
didn't want to come off as rude, but I hope you guys have a great day.
Yeah,
no,
you
fair
too.
enough. Good to talk to you, Jeff. Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, certainly he was putting some effort into the conversation rather than
Yeah,
just asserting things, which was interesting.
yeah, I definitely agree.
Tyler, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Tyler says, it's not a loop, it's a spiral. Alan Wake reference. Do you? I'm not cool
No, I
enough
have
to know
no
that
idea.
reference. I don't even know
I
who
don't even
Alan
know
Wake
what
is.
Alan. Yeah, me too. Alan Wake. It's a
I thought I
survival
was too
game.
old to get the reference, but Ian doesn't get it, so it must not be
Yeah,
age dependent.
alas, I'm not much of a video game player.
Anyways, Tyler, we really appreciate the support and for the super chat. And guys, thanks so much for being here and tapping and liking and sharing this out. If you're already watching on YouTube but you're not following, drop us a follow. We do this pretty much every Sunday morning. So if you're sitting at home thinking, man, I'm not at church, but now I'm bored because I'm not at church, tune into the Unapologetic live show. We'd love to have you every Sunday. And we got David with us now. David, how are you?
Hello?
Hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey man, I appreciate you having me on. I've been here about, like an hour, over an hour, and I really like what y'all talking about. Pretty chill. I actually have to get going. I am a Christian.
Damn.
I didn't want to just drop out and be like, okay, you just left. But I have about 10 minutes. It takes me 10 minutes to get there, and I have 10 minutes. But no, I like a lot of what y'all talking about. I've studied for uh, was particularly what I'm trying to specialize in, a couple thousand hours in the Bible, a lot of metaphysical stuff, time and substances. So maybe I'll tune in next
Damn.
time. I really do. I really do. YouTube shoots me some recommendations. I check them out, and I just happen to check this out. So I've already subscribed. So if
All right.
anything, I'll be next week. Maybe I'll come a little bit earlier.
Please,
Well, when does
yeah.
this start?
It's a
Usually
great
10
question.
in the morning.
10?
It's about 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
All right, man. I'll keep you in mind.
Absolutely. Thanks for swinging by.
Thank you.
Cheers. And with that, we've run out of guests in the guest box. So if you're watching this and you're just like, hey, listen, these clowns on screens need to know that my God is real, join up. It's at tinyurl.com/UA guest. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to give us your email address. You don't have to have an account with anybody. You just got to plop that link into your phone or your computer or your tablet, and you'll be able to join the conversation. Also, for those who are following the Atheist Experience channel, Ian and I are going to be tag teaming the Atheist Experience tonight at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be cooking most likely Steve from Nebraska, maybe Colby from Ohio, and a few, few other people I swear that call in every other week.
Are these reoccurring folks?
Well, the thing is with the Atheist Experience and like these call-in shows where like you have to actually type in a phone number, we get like a lot of repeat callers, and I suspect it's because a lot of them are deconstructing and they want to try out their arguments, or they just don't have anyone else to talk to that disagrees with them, and so they just call in the show all the time.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like there's like a dark analogy to be drawn between because I know gosh, I feel like like the self-unaliving hotlines. I hear like a similar thing happens there. Not
Mm.
probably not like in this domain, but like there's like a certain type of person I've heard who will just like call them like repeatedly because they like literally just have nothing else to do.
Yeah, actually, that's a real thing. And so, fun fact, when I was in high school, I worked at a telemarketing call center, and um, this really strange thing happens when you call elderly people, which is they'll talk to you. Everyone else hangs up
Yeah.
on you. Everybody is going to hang up on you. You get somebody, a senior citizen, and a lot of them are lonely. In fact, I had quite a few nights where I ended up on the other side of the phone with someone who sounded like they were 80 and just needed someone to talk to. And I was shit. Well,
Mm.
I'm just going to talk to this poor lady that needs someone to talk to rather than trying to sell her stuff because like it's a real thing. Like loneliness is a real thing that affects people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's like very generous of you to like take the time to talk to her.
But like could you imagine wanting to have conversations about topics and just not having anyone to talk to? I think that's why sometimes having a call-in show that I think is still using the old style technology, the old style system is beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. I think I don't know. I've been thinking about this in terms of well, I don't know. I don't think I'd be a very good parent, but sometimes I wonder. And that's like one of the considerations that I have is like, will I just be like super lonely in my life if I don't have kids? Like if I don't have kids and then I don't have like grandkids, will I be lonely? Um, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think I'm in a position to know.
it's hard to know when you're in your younger 20s what kids is going to be like when you have kids. And I kind of had an idea what it would be like because my mother ran a daycare and I grew up surrounded by kids and I was the youngest of eight and had lots of nieces and nephews. But even with that preparation, I would say having kids is a completely unique experience in life and there's nothing quite like it. And I would say for me personally, I know everyone's different. You know, not everybody is designed to have kids. But for me personally, it's the like the greatest thing for me, like the thing that brings me the most joy and fulfillment in life. And so I would recommend, you know, people to have kids. And even if you don't like kids, sometimes you figure out that you do. Now, if you really don't like kids, maybe you shouldn't have any. But I've got a coworker who's like, I don't like kids. I never liked kids. Don't want to be around them. And he goes, but I fucking love my kids. My kids are awesome. So like having kids of your own is a unique experience. It's different than being around other people's kids. It's like part of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right. Yeah. That's I don't know. I feel like I hear kind of a lot of bad things. One of my closest friends tells me that she thinks I wouldn't make a very good parent. So I don't know. I'm on the side of I probably shouldn't. I
It's
don't know.
not for everybody. It really isn't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard it described as like I don't know. You can still like do all the things that you used to love. Like you can still take your kids to all the places that you want to go. It's just that they'll ruin it. And
You're not wrong. Well, I'll tell you this. Here's kind of how it played out for me. Like I got to a point in life where I was like, you know, 30, 31, and I felt like, you know, all the stuff that I wanted to accomplish in life, all the experiences, like a lot of them I just kind of did it already. It was already done. I accomplished the stuff, right? And so there's this thing that happens when you get to a point in life where you're like, and then you have kids, you get to relive all those things that you did already, and but you're reliving it through your kids. And so
yeah.
it's enjoyable because it's not like oh like you think to yourself like I don't want to go play t-ball again. That was fine when I was 7. I have no interest in playing t-ball again, but it's fun to watch your kid play t-ball. So
Mm,
all the stuff that you loved and you enjoyed when you were a kid, you get to experience some of that with your own kids, and it's just kind of a unique experience. I don't know, but
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I can imagine that. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not, luckily I have like some amount of time. I have like a good, 5, 10 years before I actually have to make a decision. But
yeah. Well, especially because like nowadays with our medical system and whatnot, like you can have kids in your 30s and it's really not that big of a deal. You don't have to have kids in your
yeah.
20s. But let me grab some super chats that came in while we were talking to our last two guests. Marduk, thank you so much for the 4.99 super thanks. I really appreciate that, Marduk. And I suspect Marduk will probably see you tonight on AXP. Thank you so much for being here. And Alicia, good to see you, friend. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the 4.99 super chat. It says just wanted attention. Heart, you guys. Well, Alicia, you got the attention. And Alicia, I think I asked you last time you super chatted. I swear there's another Alicia on TikTok with your same last name that I'm friends with. Let me know if you're the same Alicia so I can connect the two people. But if not, that's fine. I was like, wait a minute, am I talking to the same Alicia that I've talked to on TikTok? And Edward, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, who do you think was stoned? Balaam, the angel, the donkey, or the author of Numbers? I mean, it's got to be the author of the book. But that's a wild story, actually. The talking donkey narrative in the Bible. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people that when they're younger and they're learning some of the stories of the Bible and they run upon the talking donkey, I think that's one story that gives them pause and be like, wait a minute, do I really want to
Yeah.
believe in a religion that has talking donkeys?
Yeah, exactly, right. Like, I don't know. Kind of feels like some like pagan like Zeus type shit, right? Like
Yes.
I think that Christians like to believe that their stories are not like all the other mythology. But I think like so often in the Old Testament, like it's just so obvious that it is. Like there's just no way to reconcile this. You're telling me that the story of God coming down and trying to kill Moses before he like circumcises his child or something and like dips like the foreskin on his toes, like like what the fuck are we doing here? Was that a perfect course of actions to take? That sounds crazy.
It's such a wild story. People, I think if more people read the Bible, more of them would come away thinking that this is mythology, but I
Yeah.
just don't think people are reading it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right. Like the number of people that I'll get to argue who like they don't know basic Bible facts. They're like, yeah, there was an eyewitness, Paul, and it's like, what are you like what are we doing here? You clearly haven't read the book. Like, why are you doing this?
Right. It's wild to me the amount of Christians that haven't read the book but are like full hog on with the religion. Like to me, it seems like you should read the book first before you fully commit to it. But I get
Yeah.
that we can't have that variety of Christian because we wouldn't have anyone to pull from because people who read the book aren't Christian.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like I think I don't know. My priors for the Bible were pretty low, and then I read it, and like it's just like not defensible, like straight up, like there's, and I wish that there was like some nuance to it, but it's just verse after verse where it's like crazy, like there's just nothing to say other than like it's a metaphor or like yeah, I don't think that that actually happened. I don't
Right.
know, like just like some insane mental gymnastics. I think that that's if I were a Christian, that's what I would be running like constantly. Is like, well, that didn't actually happen, you know. Book of Samuel, no, it didn't happen. Kings, it didn't happen. It's all metaphor. It's about the
Uh,
lessons, but
well,
not
that
those
is
lessons.
something. Yeah, that's something that a lot of Christians do is it's the metaphor thing,
Yeah.
which I could see why that might be appealing.
Yeah, but presumably, and you would know better about this than I would, but presumably the people who lived at the time when these like various like fragments were developed, like presumably they took them to be, or at least like many of them, they took many of them to be not metaphorical.
Right. No, they really didn't. It seemed to be that this was their best explanation for the state of affairs. And, and then people later said, well, it came from God, so we can't question it. And here we are, 2025. People think that talking donkeys exist.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I don't know. We have like real actual human beings who just straight up say, "Oh yeah, science is bullshit," you know? Here's my storybook. I have a far more plausible explanation.
Right.
Uh, you know, Yahweh, the Iron Age deity.
Oh man, let me grab a couple super chats, and we've got one in from the Modern Scientist. Thank you so much. It says, "Do you guys have any good philosophy of religion book
Yeah,
recommendations?"
lots. It depends on what specifically you're trying to get. If you want good overview, so unfortunately, like all the good overviews are like really expensive, but I don't know. You can probably pirate them. Hopefully, I think I think everything that Graham Oppy has ever written, like all of his like big overview books, he has arguing about gods, describing gods, and then the best argument against God. Of those, I think the best argument against God is probably the most readable. It's short. The argument is extremely compelling, in my opinion. It's like an incredible framework for philosophy of religion. His argument's very simple. It's just that if we can explain all the things without God, then there isn't a reason to add God to the worldview. And that's true. That's a great way to approach it. And then he systematically goes through all of the arguments in favor of God, and then he just refutes them. And then after he says, well, looks like none of the arguments were successful. So we just compare the hypothesis that naturalism is true to the hypothesis that like theism is true. And because naturalism is simpler than theism, like if we can just explain everything with the laws of physics in the universe, then why would we want to explain everything with the laws of physics in the universe and then also God? There's no point. It's like the Occam quote. It's vain to do with two what can be done with one. I don't know. I think that that's like a great one. There's also Is God the Best Explanation of Things by Josh Rasmussen and Felipe Leon. It's a dialogue between Professor Josh Rasmussen, who's like one of the leading philosophers of religion, who's like a Christian, and Professor Felipe Leon, who is like, I think technically he's agnostic, but he rejects like all the conceptions of God that he's heard. So I think that those are great books. I'm trying to think of what else. Those are like the good overviews. After that, I think you start getting into like specific issues and specific arguments. And at that point, I just recommend like reading philosophy papers, or reading books that pertain to the specific issues. But those are all good overviews.
Yeah, definitely good recommends. I haven't been able to read Graham Oppy, but it's on my hit list now.
You need
That
to.
Ian's been talking about him for a year.
Yeah, I plug him constantly. It's great. He is a wonderful philosopher, clear, insightful, highly intelligent.
And we've got a super chat from Jake, my friend Jake, from the Exis Brothers. Thank you for the super chat. Says, having kids allowed me to live vicariously through them and experience things that I never got to do as a child. That's actually a really good point. You don't just get to relive your experiences, you get to relive new experiences that you weren't able to have when you were a child, right? And it kind of gives you an opportunity to correct some of the wrongs that your parents and your parents' parents did, right? So you have an opportunity to build a better world starting with your offspring, which is, I think, a really cool experience. And we've got a reply from Alicia. Is it Alicia? I remember now. It says, I am she. I am the same Alisa. Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate you being kind
No,
with me
you
mispronouncing your
fuck.
name.
It was you did it again, Alicia.
Alicia.
Oh my
Fuck me.
god. They even sent the pronunciation.
You know
How
I can't
how
pronounce
can you
things.
do this?
Oh my God, this is goes to the growing list of things that I cannot pronounce. Nothing will ever top Garba Gaiman, though. That might be the top of the list.
You know what? Earlier in the stream, you like mispronounced your own name. You called yourself like the G Construction Zone or something.
Oh. I know words good.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. The Lord
Yeah,
giveth and the Lord taketh away.
you got it right. Yeah. What can you do? Oh, well, thank you so much, Alicia, for clearing that up. And if I ever pronounce your name wrong, you can chastise me in our DMs. Don't worry, I'll take the beating fine. And I think we're out of guests.
Yeah. Hey, if you want to debate us, you wanna step into the ring. Oh, speak of.
Speaking of, right, there we go. How you doing, Shitty?
You. That's not his. This fucking guy.
Yo, what's up?
Yeah,
Hey, how's it
what's a good
going?
word?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are
Cool.
you are you a believer of some kind?
Yeah, I'm Eastern Orthodox.
Cool. So, what would be like the most compelling evidence or argument for your God being real?
I like to use the Kalam cosmological argument.
Okay.
Sure, go for it.
Do you think that God was eternally willing the universe into existence?
Yeah, sure. I'd say God is immutable.
Okay. So then by this logic, then the universe would just exist eternally.
No, because okay. So have you heard of Aristotelian causes?
Doesn't he have like four of them?
Yeah. So there's like a formal cause, and there's like efficient causes and material causes. So I would say God formally caused the universe.
What is that? So what does that mean?
Through some sort of like inherent intent, whereas the universe in itself would be the material cause.
I just
Right?
don't
So this
understand
is
how that gets you out of the argument, though. Is God willing something sufficient for that thing to exist?
no. So I'm saying God could have eternally had the state of the formal cause, but this is distinguished from the material cause in and of itself.
So what materially caused the universe?
It'd be the conjunction of the formal and the material, but these are separate states.
So the material cause is the conjunction of the material cause and the formal?
No, 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 no.
Wait,
The
so
act
what's
of
the material cause?
so the act of the formal and the material coming to be is what would be the result of our universe, but this doesn't have to be eternally the case, I'd say.
What's the material cause for the universe?
So the material cause is just the result of the universe coming to be.
So the universe was caused by the universe coming to be?
Right, so it's a distinct moment which is separate from the, I'd say, the formal cause.
Well, then it just seems like we've got like our ordering wrong. So I don't understand how the universe can be the cause of the universe. The universe coming to be is like the cause of the universe.
No, no, no. So there's an order to Aristotle's causes, right? So the formal obviously has to pre-necessitate the material, but the point is I would say he's immutable in that the formal cause always was. Like he doesn't change states. Oh, have I lost connection? Can you hear me?
No? Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So the formal cause always was, but I'd say the material cause was at a point, so it wasn't.
Why
wasn't
was it
always
at
there.
what necessitated it being at this point? What caused the material cause to be at this point? And also
So just
point in what?
So the point that commences the timeline.
But point in what? Where's the point? Like on what scale is the point? Like what line is the point on?
Yeah, it'd be the commencing of the timeline. We've already had this convo. I don't know if you remember, Ian.
Yeah, I definitely
spoke
do. How
about-
could I forget it? But so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
take a point, like the point that it happened would presumably be like a point on the timeline. Would you disagree with
Right.
that?
So I'd take it to be just the first point.
So it's the first point on
So
the
the
timeline.
commencing.
So what was
Right.
different
So at a
between
point,
but prior to that point God existed, right?
yeah.
So what was different between the point prior to the point where that happened? Like what caused it to happen at that point as opposed to like the point prior?
Well, God would be the cause. I'm not sure what you're asking.
So wait, so then God decided that it would happen at like a specific time?
I wouldn't say decided in that sense because, as I said, he wouldn't have changing brain state if you even want to refer to it as a brain, like his mind.
Yeah.
It wouldn't change in that sense. So the formal cause always was. Whatever point. Now again, he's atemporal, so you can't distinguish these points with some sort of time scale. From our reference frame, we can, but from his, you cannot. But from whatever point the material cause comes to be is obviously distinct from the formal cause, right?
Well, so but the cause of the material cause is the formal cause, correct?
Yeah, sure.
So it's the conjunction
It's
of the formal
the
cause with the
conjunction.
material cause, which is itself caused by the formal cause. So it would all
Hang
come
on,
back
hang
to
on.
this. Okay, so maybe a better question.
No, hang
Was
on.
God
The con-
eternally willing the material cause?
No, so the conjunction would be the efficient cause, right? It's what draws the index. So
And
again,
by
you have to
efficient cause,
understand.
do you mean like proximate cause when you say efficient cause?
Hang on. So yeah, efficient is what brings the material cause to be. It's Aristotle's second cause.
But is that the same thing as like a proximate cause?
So I'm saying the formal and the material conjunction is the efficient, which forms the index.
The question for the third time, is the efficient cause the same thing as a proximate cause?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. So was God eternally willing the efficient cause?
No.
Did God start willing the efficient cause?
Start would be temporal.
Okay, wait, so did God progress in existence from not willing the efficient cause to willing the efficient cause?
Okay, Ian, when you speak about time, you have to understand It's
I didn't say
indexed to a
time.
reference frame.
I didn't
Hang on,
say
wait.
time.
You're using temporal notions.
Just the
So when you
progression of existence.
yeah, so that's temporal. So when you reference time, it's indexed to reference frames, right? So if God doesn't have a reference frame in a temporal sense, it's a category error to even put these implications on him.
Wait, so, but it seems like very much like God changes. So if God was not always willing the efficient cause, then something must have changed such that he was willing the efficient cause.
So the efficient cause is what conjuncts the material cause to be. That's what commences our timeline. This is distinct from God, right? Our universe is a distinct ontology from God himself.
Wait, so what
So
causes
this
the
comes
efficient
to be at a.
cause?
It's the first cause in our timeline,
But what causes
right?
it?
But it's not. There's no God, but there's no time when God causes it from his reference frame.
Was God eternally causing the efficient cause? Or
No,
yeah.
God would have eternally had the what you'd call the formal cause, but the efficient cause is the index, like the start of our timeline.
But God causes the efficient cause. That's what you just said. So was God eternally causing it?
So the efficient cause would be the start of the cause and effect timeline.
But you said it was caused by God. Was God eternally causing it?
No, God would have eternally had the I guess mind state to create it. But the universe in and of itself is distinct from God. And when you reference the starting point, you reference it from our reference frame, not from God's.
Wait, so if God has the mental state to cause something, is that sufficient for it to exist?
Depends what you mean by cause, right?
Just like I don't know, like a
Through which
thing that
sense?
yields an effect, like an event that yields, maybe like a definition would be good.
So the effect
Find
being the universe,
cause.
the effect. Sorry, I got shit popping up. The effect being the universe, that index forms with the efficient cause.
Okay,
The
with the
point is,
efficient.
right,
But God, if God was eternally, so then God would change. He would change from not willing the efficient cause to willing the efficient cause, which means he can't be outside of time.
No. God in and of himself doesn't change, right? This index point you're referring to is from our reference frame, that it's a temporal notion.
Does God ever will the efficient cause?
Yes, but from our reference frame, that would be when the universe starts, right?
Okay, so
So
at one point,
is
God
your
was
view
not willing
that
the efficient cause, and then at a different point, God was willing the efficient cause, which means that God is not immutable.
so from our reference frame again, because when you use temporal notions, you have to infer a reference frame, right? You can't just have some stance independent reference frame because it's illogical and non-scientific. So when you're saying when he set to be this efficient cause, you're referring to the first effect, aka the start of our timeline. The start of our timeline is the conjunction of cause and effect, which commences the timeline.
I guess I still don't understand how this isn't just like a straight contradiction.
Yeah, because the timeline commences at the first conjunction. God is the first cause, so there's no time before the
Was
first.
God eternally willing the first conjunction?
No.
Was there a point where God did will the first conjunction?
A point, you would be referring to temporal notion from our reference frame, I'd say.
Did God will the first conjunction?
So if you want to talk about God's reference frame, which is almost illogical to do, but if that's what you're trying to do, these moments wouldn't be distinct in the way they are for us.
So it's the same moment?
The same. No.
So God both was willing it and wasn't willing it?
Because see, you're inferring distinctions, right? You're inferring temporals.
But
You're trying to draw
would
a
you say that
contradiction from
God was
one
both willing it and also not willing it?
No, he always had the, I guess, physical, if you want to call it that, intent to create it. But the moment, well, I'm just referring to like the formal as being the intent, but the moment of which it commences, this is an indexed point, right? For us, this would be when the timeline commenced. Before that, God could have eternally been, and just ontologically speaking, this this view is just more parsimonious, right? Because your view has
No,
infinite
it's
ontologies.
contradictory.
It's just not.
Well, it just like pretty clearly is, right? So if God was eternally willing it, or if God was not eternally willing it, but then he did will it, then that means that he changes. And if he changes, he's not immutable.
So if it's a formal cause in that it's some sort of design, some sort of essence, it has no ontology, and it can just always have been a part of, I guess you could say, God's plan.
So
This
maybe I
has
could
no.
maybe I could formalize it, and you could tell me where I'm going wrong. So we might say premise one, at some time or at some point, I don't know, there was a state
From
of
whose
God's
reference frame?
existence where he was not willing the universe into existence.
From whose reference frame?
I don't know. What do you mean?
When you speak temporally, you need to infer a reference frame, unless you're just going against
And
relativity.
what do you mean by
right?
reference frame? What do you mean by that?
So time is reference to an index. I mean, is indexed to a reference frame. Time has no objective or intersubjective stance. It's completely dependent on reference frames. So when you infer temporal notions, you need to be specific, like to what reference frame.
Like an inertial? Are you talking like the special, like the time dilation, like inertial reference frames?
Well, sure. Yeah, in special relativity or just in general relativity.
Wait, does God have an inertial reference frame?
No, not in the sense. No, because that requires something that has mass, which God obviously does not. I'm just saying. I mean, you're going by relativity, right? Do you or do you not adhere to relativity? Okay, so you need to go by the implications of which relativity infers. So you have to accept that time is relative to a reference frame. It's not intersubjective and it's not objective, right?
So, but just to be clear, like this kills your entire theology. Like,
no, it doesn't.
Because if there is no absolute time, then that means that God can't will things to happen at specific times, because in order for him to will things happen at specific times, he would need a reference frame. And especially prior to the creation of the universe, he wouldn't have a reference frame. But also, there's no reason for him to privilege any given reference frame. So
relativity doesn't infer a reference frame to something not composed of baryonic matter in that sense, right? Because if you're traveling at sea, it's impossible to even have a reference frame. And if you want to use these implications on God, he necessarily... No, it's
well,
sure
light still has a reference frame. It's just that time doesn't pass in the reference frame.
No, that's wrong. Photons cannot have a reference frame. It's a category error to even say they have proper time. Proper time is what infers a reference frame. Photons cannot.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Insofar as they just wouldn't experience time, that's fine. Yeah.
Because
so then you would say that God doesn't have, but then also from the perspective
proper time
of
requires you to be a stationary velocity, which photons cannot.
From the perspective of a photon, there just wouldn't be any time, right? Like time-based statements
so this is the point.
From the lack of a reference frame are just going to be incoherent.
So this is why I just apply this to God in a sense, right? Whereas if you're not composed of matter or these fermionic quantum fields of which restrict you to time, you're not bound by time in the same sequential respect, right? And so God wouldn't be using this. Like, I could literally use special relativity to help my arguments in this sense, in that if you're not bound by these fields, you're not bound by time in the same regard.
So how does God refer to time? Do you think that God wills specific things happen at specific times?
That's why I'm using this analogy, because God doesn't have a reference frame in this regard. He's atemporal.
But does God will things happen at specific times? Like, did God will that like Jesus would resurrect 3 days, or like at like some specific date?
So the times are from our reference, right? We can pinpoint these times. To God, all points are simultaneous. It's simultaneity, and it's not a contradiction to say point A and point B were simultaneous to God.
Wait, so just to be clear,
even scientifically speaking, this is not a contradiction.
Oh, sure. But then, if all moments are simultaneous, then why did Jesus' resurrection happen on like the third day as opposed to the second?
Yeah, that's from our perspective.
But from like God's perspective, why did it happen? Wait, from God's perspective, did it happen on the second day too?
God doesn't have a perspective.
So, if God was like simultaneously willing, I guess that just doesn't answer the question, right? So, God's willing Jesus resurrect. If all moments are going to be simultaneous, then why did Jesus' resurrection happen on the third day as opposed to the second?
So it's not a contradiction to say that for God, these do not have like specific temporal points, but he also intended them, right? That's not contradictory. Pardon me.
But wait, what specifically did he intend?
So everything in this regard, right? He has what I keep referring to as the formal cause, the intent, I would say, to put it into action. But all of these intentions, like he's immutable, right? So he has all of these intents simultaneously. But for us, we draw distinctions in them because we're bound by time. So we can say this happened at point A, point B, point C. But for God, they're simultaneous because he's not bound by space-time.
The question again was just what specific intent did God have during the resurrection of Christ? Was it like
so
Christ will resurrect at like what's the intent there?
Yeah, it was a formal cause.
That's just not an answer to the question. What specifically is God's intent?
What do you mean by that?
So the way that I might understand it is that God intended for Jesus of Nazareth to resurrect, like, I don't know, was it like 44 AD, 36 AD? Whenever Jesus of Nazareth...
33 technically.
36.
Yeah, 33 AD. God wills Jesus of Nazareth resurrects 33 AD, or whatever God's like time equivalent is. But if God doesn't have time, then how does the intent map on to like any specific cause?
Yeah, because these distinctions are drawn by us, even though God intended them. But
that's
obviously
just not an answer. That's like point blank not an answer to the question.
But it is, right? It is, because God could eternally have all of these intents, right? And I understand it. It doesn't sound intuitive. It doesn't sound intuitive.
Well, it sounds directly contradictory.
No, but it's not contradictory because you're equivocating on like reference frames and times.
Wait, did Jesus' resurrection happen at a specific time?
For us, yes.
Did God will that Jesus' resurrection happen at a specific time?
Category error.
Why did Jesus' resurrection happen on the third day as opposed to the second?
Are you asking for like the biblical narrative, or are you asking for a temporal?
I'm asking like what's the causation, right? How do we go from God's will to Jesus rises on the third day as opposed to God's will, Jesus rises on the second day? Because the classic theist has like the easy answer that, well, God just willed it happen like 33 AD on like this specific day. But you don't have that answer if God doesn't have like these temporal notions.
I can have that answer. I just wouldn't say God intended it on, 33 or 36, whenever exactly it is AD. I would just say that referent is from our perspective.
When did God intend for it to happen?
When he like inferred the efficient cause.
Which is when?
From our perspective, I think it must be 33 because I trust Jason's credibility on that.
I'm sorry, you don't deserve that. So
wait, what?
It's Justin.
Oh, did I say Jason? Sorry.
Don't worry.
You're good.
I get it a lot. Don't worry.
You're good. So why does this efficient cause? How do we get from God's will to the efficient cause? Is Justin? What day did Jesus resurrect? Was it? I know it's wait. Oh, hold on. I know that it's a contradiction, but what did like the majority of them say?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, it should have been either on Passover or the day after Passover.
With the resurrection or the execution?
Well, the execution is either on Passover Eve or perhaps the day before Passover. The resurrection is either the day after Passover or perhaps 2 days after Passover. It kind of depends on which gospel you're reading.
Fuck. God damn it.
It's either 2 or 1.5 days later.
Sure. Okay. Wait. So, well, I guess we'll just keep it generic still. So, how do we get from like God's will, therefore Jesus resurrects 2 days later as opposed to 1 days later? Like God, so God's will, the efficient cause, then he resurrects 2 days later. But why isn't it God's will, the efficient cause, 1 day later? Like what differentiates it?
Oh, because God intended it to be at that time. Right? I'm not saying things just happen at random, and God would have no, intent and or motive, right? I'm just saying you can't infer temporal notions in that same sense as like we would perceive them.
So, does this event occur based on like some sort of divine calendar where God says this will happen at this time, or does this happen via like a change in God's will? Like on the second day, God is willing the efficient cause, but on like the first day, he wasn't.
I guess when I refer to like our timeline of our universe that we experience, God obviously being all knowing would know everything that happens in the timeline, like start to end. And so he would intend them to have like some sort of sequential order. Just that for him, they exist in unison. That's all.
But doesn't that contradict special
No, it
relativity?
doesn't. No, how so?
Because there isn't like a present moment, so I'm not sure how we can organize like a timeline when there's going to be like specific things that are traveling at such fast speeds that they will have experienced less time.
Wait, can you say that again?
Sure, right. So if there was like a rocket ship traveling at like close to the speed of light, it is a clock. It says noon. We have a clock that says noon here. After an hour, the clock on the spaceship traveling close to the speed of light is gonna, maybe it'll say like 12:05, whereas the clock on
Wait,
Earth will
from
say
their reference
1.
frame,
Yeah.
the person in the reference frame, it would still say 1 o'clock.
Wait, what?
Like to them, time would travel the same. Time would tick the same. Sorry.
Wait, so we're saying like relative to the clock that's on Earth, the one that's like closer to stationary.
Okay,
So
sure.
if let's say like the rocket ship departs at noon and we have like a clock that's at noon, by the time the clock at Earth says 1, the rocket ship comes back and the rocket ship says like maybe like 12:05. So it seems like there is no such thing as like an absolute time.
Yeah, that kind of proves my point, right? And that's what the block theory is. Is that the universe is like some static, not static. It adheres to B theory, and that all moments are equally real. And so we, as beings limited by these temporal notions, because of how we're constructed by God, we experience what is a now, but God would experience the entire block at once.
So the problem then becomes that if God is willing specific things happen at specific times, but there is no
You just said
absolute
times, right?
time.
There's
What?
just an order. There's just an order, but there's not a time in that regard.
Wait, so you think that God has access to like an order of events?
So he caused this block. The block has an order, right? To
Is this
God,
order
the order.
time? Is this like a
From our
temporal
perspective.
order?
From our perspective, yeah.
But from our perspective, things are disorderly, right? Like it's possible that my present is your future.
Right. But each of us individually travel in a linear direction towards the future. It's not random in that regard.
But in like an overall sense, like when we look at it from like a top-down perspective, it is the case that there is no such thing as like a present time.
Yeah, just a block.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, but then that seems like it takes out God's ability to will specific things happen at like specific times.
No, because each ontological thing has like an A to B like traversal, right? And so
What do you mean?
he intends like you being like an ontological like being, right? You have an A to B temporally in terms of like a timeline you exist on. You don't go from random point. You don't go from today to 300 CE to, you know what I mean, 400 BCE. Like you have a linear projection towards the future. Every ontological thing does. So there is no randomness in that regard.
So
But the block
would
in
you
and
say
of
like
itself-
God doesn't will things happen at specific times, he wills things happen at specific orders?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like there's a sequence, but there's no
And
time from his perspective.
but is the order like temporal, or what is the order? Because I take like the but like, would you say that? Maybe I'll just go ahead. Like, what's your definition of time?
Like a cause and effect.
So time is just cause and effect?
Yeah, like an index would be like a point, and you gather these points, you traverse these points, you're traversing time.
Okay, wait.
Like
Surely you don't want to
have
say
an
an
effect.
index,
You
because like
can't have
there's
an
like
effect.
like spatial indexicals too, but we wouldn't say that like time is space.
There's spatial. Can you expand?
Well, you said that like time is like just the indexicals,
Right.
but there are indexicals that aren't time.
Such as.
Space. Like if I said here.
So whatever caused you to be here, and the effect of you being there would be like the moment, right?
So
And
specifically,
there's going to
what
be a
I'm referring
sequence of
to is
them.
that there's like
Like this.
locations in space that you can be. Would you acknowledge that there are like indexical locations in space that you can be?
Yeah, of course.
But we wouldn't say that space is time, presumably.
Well, the traversal through space would be the experience of time.
But light traverses space, but it doesn't experience time.
Well, that's because it doesn't have. Yeah, well, sure, it doesn't experience proper time, right? But the whatever emits the photon, the cause, and then the effect of it, that index point you could refer to as a point in time, and then the effect of the photon, say like interacting with like a valence electron, that causes another index. You could say point A to point B. That you could say is time, light's experience of time, in a
Then
sense.
light does experience time?
No, not in the sense that it would like you could draw like a point A and a point B, and that's what like Blitz would call like time in that regard. That he holds the idea that photons do experience time because of affine time, but that's not what proper time is.
Okay, so I guess
Proper
this
time is
just
like
seems...
a subcategory of it.
Yeah, this just seems to be... I guess this just seems contradictory, right? So if we acknowledge... If you're saying that time is the traversal through space, but light
time is the cause
traverses
and
through
effect.
space, however, light is not experiencing time, then it seems like the experience of time cannot possibly be the experience of traversing through space.
So when I refer to time, I'm referring to points because you can't progress time at like a steady rate. So I just refer to certain points, right?
There are points in
you can
space
refer,
too, so points where? Like, I think you need to specify.
But when I say points, I'm referring to like the point of the cause and effects. So like the index point.
Causal and...
So if something causes an effect in space, you could refer to that as like a point in time, I guess.
Oh, well then maybe something that I've been thinking about this recently, it intrigues me. That would mean that you would like reject like retrocausality.
What's retrocausality?
Yeah, it's just that like the notion that there are certain effects that happen prior to the cause.
What's an example of this?
So I know that there's like examples that people have of like time travel is like a classic example of this. Like
time travel.
Yeah, like if you want like a hypothetical one, but if you want like a theological one,
that's no, time travel is not logical, or at least not in the past.
Oh, sure. That's fine. I mean, if you don't want to engage with that, that's fine. But I would also probably say that God's foreknowledge is retro-caused.
No, definitely not. His effects do not precede causes in that, like, formal causes always are, and a material cause such as the universe obviously does not precede the formal. You can't precede something infinite.
Did God always have the foreknowledge that he has?
The foreknowledge. His states of mind always are.
So he always had the foreknowledge that he had?
Sure.
Yeah. What caused him to know that we would have this conversation?
What caused him to know? I mean, God's knowledge pertaining to the universe. I mean, it all exists in unison. I'm not sure of the question.
So you wouldn't say that the fact that you and I chose to have this conversation is what causes God to know that we were going to have this conversation?
No, he would have known. He would have always known this conversation was going to happen.
But that wasn't in any way caused by like the fact that we actually have this conversation.
No.
Oh, then you just forfeit free will.
No, I don't. I'm a compatibilist on free will.
Okay, so you think that something can be like 100% inevitable, that you can have
so
like
I
no
think,
choice whatsoever, and that you can
so
still
I
have
think
free
that,
will?
yeah, so the agent makes the choice. It's just that God knows it was going to happen. And this is actually the exact same in your worldview, by the way.
I might
If you
I
adhere to
might be
B
like a straight
theory,
up determinist, but that's
yeah. So if you adhere to B theory, you have the exact same view on time. It's just that
yeah,
it's deterministic, and the agent just causes it. It's exactly the same.
yeah. So, are you saying that like the agent causes it, but the agent doesn't choose it?
No, the agent makes the choices. The agent causes it, right? And we do have free will in that regard. But the reason I say compatibilist is that if we could say, if we could traverse back in time 5 minutes ago, all future events would happen exactly the same, right? In the sense that there's no pure randomness to the universe.
So I take a choice to be decisions between like one or more possibilities. Would you agree with that definition of choice?
Yep.
If God knows everything that's going to happen in advance, then there's only one possibility, because everything that God knows becomes inevitable.
No. So I'd just say the agent had its own free choice between option A and B. And let's say, for example, you pick A. God always knew you were going to pick A.
So I'll lay it out like this. Oh wait, then
But
God would have then God would have retrocausality.
yeah,
Like,
you
his
just
knowledge would,
ceded
yeah.
it. Yeah, thank you. You just ceded the argument to his initial point.
Wait, how so?
So if God knows it because you did it, then that means that your doing it is the cause of God knowing it, which means that there would be retrocausality on your view.
No, because God knew it before you were going to do it, right? This is why, again, I gotta say, you gotta stop equivocating on like reference frames, because you're trying to draw a contradiction between reference frames here.
So it's caused. Like, do you recognize that like his knowledge is caused? There's a
God caused
reason why he knows this specific thing, and that reason is because you're going to do it. So your doing it is the sufficient reason for God having that specific knowledge. God knew that we would have this conversation because we chose to have this conversation. Like, God's knowledge is grounded, it exists because of our choice to do it, which means that you
Right.
would have retrocausality on your view. You either
No,
have
because
to give up free will, or you have to acknowledge that there's like retrocausality.
no, because even in this case, God precedes the effect, right? Even though the effect is to our control, God still precedes it. God is still the cause of it.
So the effect in this instance would be that God knows X situation is going to happen. So if God knows that X situation is going to happen, then the reason why he knows it is going to come down to your choice.
No. So
So then God
you're
causes
laying
it?
it out as if, hang on, you're laying it out as if like we do an action, and then post us doing that action, God knows it, but it's reversed.
Say it
God
one more
knows.
time.
So you laid it out as if we, like pursue some action, and then post that action occurring, God knows of it, but it's reversed in that God knew everything that would be at the start of the universe. This is why I'm a compatibilist, right? In that it's predictable, but it's still freely chosen by the agent.
Is God just making predictions?
No, he knows all that pertains to truth in our, I guess you could say, block that we exist in.
What's the mechanism by which God knows the decision we're going to make?
Yeah.
What is the mechanism?
Yep.
I'll just say God's knowledge pertains to all that is true in our universe.
Right,
So
but
I guess
how does
I
God
don't know.
know?
I don't understand. Sorry, he just
How does
knows
how does God know what choices we're going to make?
because he's atemporal, so he's
Thank
not
you.
bound by the
Yes,
time.
Yeah.
exactly, because he already knows the future, because theoretically he lives in the future and the past.
Yep. Yeah, so then you just have retrocausality on your view. Like God's knowledge would be caused by his like observing, in whatever way God observes of you actually doing the action.
Wait, how's that retro if it pre-necessitates the effect?
Because the thing that causes him to have that specific set of knowledge is the action itself. So the fact that you and I are having this
No, 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 no,
conversation is
no.
the cause of God knowing that we're going to have this conversation.
No, I already explained. The knowledge pertaining to the truth of the universe, he would acquire all of that as soon as the universe is put into action, right?
So
Oh no, sorry, I would even say he always has that knowledge. Sorry.
maybe I'll just give you a syllogism. Premise one, if God knows that X event will happen at time t, then X event happening at time t is inevitable. Premise two, if X event happening at time t is inevitable, then it's not possible for X event at time t to not occur. Premise three, if it is not possible for event X to happen at time t to not occur, then there are no choices because there are no possibilities.
I disagree with the last or the last premise.
Okay, so you would grant that it's not that there are no possibilities on your view.
There's no possibility to do other than what you will. That holds to your worldview as well, just so you're aware.
Yeah, no, but I'm a determinist. I would reject like the notion of choice as anything other than like illusory, like a
So you don't think we
fictionalist
have
about
free?
choice.
You don't think we have free will?
Of course not. It depends. Well, it depends what you mean by free will. But if by that you mean like we're the sole sufficient cause of our actions, then of course not. No, I think there's like a million sufficient
No, I'll
causes.
just take it to be the ability to choose or to do otherwise or to have multiple choice.
But if there aren't possibilities, then you can't choose because a choice requires possibility.
No, but the agent has the possibility, right? God just knows what one you will take, and that's what compatibilism is.
Then you would need to reject one of the first two premises. So premise one.
No, that's not true.
Because the conclusion of the first two premises is that if God knows that X event happens at time t, then it is not possible for anything other than that to happen.
Yeah, that holds to a compatible. There's no contradiction between that and compatibilism.
Do you recognize? Let's make sure we're remaining honest and linear here. Do you recognize that even if it's compatible with compatibilism, which we'll get into in a second, you still have to see that there are no possibilities?
There's no possibility that you choose otherwise, obviously, because you were always going to choose said action. That doesn't mean the agent didn't make that choice.
So would you acknowledge that a choice requires the decision between one or more possibilities?
Yeah, but do you accept that you will always choose one of them?
I acknowledge that and I accept that. But
Right.
if you were to be someone who believes in like free will or the ability to choose, you would have to say that there's multiple possibilities. But if there aren't multiple, if there's only one possibility, then you can't make choices just by the definition of choice.
Yeah, there's multiple possibilities, but only one comes to fruition. And whichever one this is, God knows of it.
You just said that there isn't. You just told me that there's only one possibility.
No, there's only one that comes to fruition, right?
Like, is there only one possibility?
In what respect?
Like in an absolute sense. For situations that have not happened yet, are there multiple possibilities for how things can happen?
So to the reference frame of, say, me, right? I'm going to have breakfast. I'm trying to choose between, say, an apple and a banana. I have multiple choice there. God, being atemporal, knows that I'm going to choose, say, the apple. Okay? And I, as the agent, freely make the choice to have the apple. Now, if I were to reverse time 10 minutes ago, in both my worldview or yours, I would choose the apple again, right? Because there's no true randomness. These events are set out in that they're predictable in a sense. That doesn't mean the agent is making the choice. So if you're viewing a stance independently, you would see, okay, this person chose this one outcome. There was only one quote-unquote possibility. But in that index moment to the reference frame, it had multiple choice.
Okay. Would you agree with the definition of choice, an act of selecting or making decisions when faced with two or more possibilities?
Wait, were you listening to my explanation at all, or were you just Googling? Because I literally explained that.
Wait, but do you accept the definition or do you reject it?
So my examples had me having multiple choice.
Okay, so you do think that a choice requires possibility.
Wait, is there a flaw in the example I just gave before we like go on this
Yeah,
tangent?
yeah. Specifically, it's going to be that if God already foreknew this, then it's inevitable, and if it's inevitable, then it's not possible. There's no possible world where it doesn't happen. If there's no possible world where it doesn't happen, then that means that a choice cannot be between two or more possibilities, which means that you would just be contradicting yourself on like the basic definition of choice.
No, it can still be like contingent in that regard, in that it could have been otherwise. That doesn't
Which premise
go
do you
against.
reject? 1, 2, or 3?
Restate them.
Yeah. Premise 1, if God knows X, then X is inevitable. Premise 2, if X is inevitable, then it's not possible for X to not happen. Premise 3, if it's not possible for X to not happen, then there are no choices.
Premise 3.
Okay. Would you
You're
agree or
equivocating.
disagree with the definition of choice as being an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities? Do you agree or disagree with that definition of choice?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so you would acknowledge then that in order to make choices, you need two or more possibilities.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, but then premise 3 is that if it's not possible for X to not happen, then you cannot make any choices. I guess like a premise that might come between like the antecedent and the consequent, we might say if it's not possible for X to not happen, then there is not two or more possibilities in
So I would
terms
say
of whether or not X will happen.
I would say it was possible that X would not happen, but God always knew regarding that point in T that X would happen.
So then you don't reject premise 3.
No, I reject it because the terminology used was equivocating.
Okay, so the antecedent for it is that if it's not possible for X to not happen, then that means that there are no choices. But your rebuttal to this was to
Well, I'm saying
say,
it
well, if it
is
is possible for X to not happen, then, but that's just going to be rejecting the direct proof.
I don't want to go through this again.
So, I mean, right, like, in order to reject this, you need to hold that there's scenarios where the antecedent holds, but the consequent does not.
Okay, say the conditional again.
Yeah. If it's not possible for X to not happen, then there are no choices.
Okay, I agree with that. Sure, I'll agree with that. If
Then
it's
you just
not
agree with the
possible-
syllogism
if
that
it's
if
not
God
possible-
knows that X is going to happen, then that means there are no choices.
No, because you're equivocating again.
Okay. Okay. So
You're
then
literally
we'll just go through.
equivocating
So
terms,
you just accepted the third premise word for word.
No,
Let's
but
go
you
through.
equivocated.
Let's go through the premises one more time. Let's
Wait,
see if
this
you
is
can
exactly
find
what
one
you
that
did
you
last
disagree
time, by
with.
the way. This
Calm
is
down.
exactly what you did last
Calm
time,
down.
by the way.
We'll just take it from the top. We're gonna remain honest and linear. Premise 1.
No, because this isn't honest. This
Calm
isn't
down.
honest.
You're crashing out. Deep
Wait,
breaths.
Ian, you're not being honest. You're not
Deep
being honest.
breaths. You're crashing out.
I'm-
Let's just
I'm
be
fine.
honest and linear and go through the syllogism one more time. If God knows X, then X is inevitable. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I disagree with the consequent. I will accept the antecedent, and I will disagree with the consequent.
Gotcha.
I'll say God can know X. God can know X. And wait, what was the consequent?
You super don't want to reject this one because it means that he's not all knowing.
Wait, no,
if
just
you
say it
reject
again.
This one,
'cause
yeah.
It made sense in my head, and then I
If
forgot.
God knows X is going to happen at time t, then X happening at time t is inevitable.
Okay, no, I accept that.
Yeah. Do you agree that if X happening at time t is inevitable, then it's not possible for X to not happen at time t?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. And would you agree that if it's not possible for X to not happen at time t, then it's not possible for there to be choices?
No, I disagree with that consequent. There can still be choices, but something inevitably happen, right? That was my whole point.
But there would be no possibilities, so you couldn't select between two or more possibilities.
No, you had the possibilities, but the result was inevitable through God's perspective.
So
This
the
is what I mean by
antecedent
you're
here,
equivocating, right? You're equivocating on perspectives.
the antecedent here is that if it's not possible for X to not happen, then that means that there are no choices. So if we attempt to disprove this, you would need to come up with situations where it's not possible for X to not happen, but also you hold that there are choices. So you would say that there are
Yeah, that's
choices
literally
even if there is only one possibility.
Yeah, and that's literally the example I gave you with me, like
Okay.
going down, choosing between an apple and a banana. God knows I am going to pick the apple as he's atemporal, right? He knew from the beginning of time, the whole timeline. So it's quote unquote inevitable from his perspective. Again, this is the equivocation you're making. From his perspective, he always knew this is what it means to be inevitable, right? From the agent's perspective that makes the free choice, I could have chosen either one, and I chose to have the apple. There's no
Okay.
contradiction here.
So then we'll
It's
just
what
go through
compatibilism
the
is.
we'll just go through the definition of choice one more time. Do you agree that a choice is an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities?
Did you hear my analogy?
I did. Do you agree
Okay.
that a choice is an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities?
Do you understand that that definition fit into my analogy? So obviously I accept it.
Okay. So you think you would hold to the fact that a choice requires two or more possibilities?
Yes.
Okay. So you cannot have choices with only one possibility.
From which reference frame?
Presumably God's, because he's correct about everything. So if God believes that there's no
Oh,
possibility.
see this. Okay. If we're talking God's perspective,
Wait, so whose perspective is the correct one, mine or God's?
it depends, right? If you're talking free will, then the free will is specific to the agent, right? Would say you.
If
Whereas
God
if you're
believes
talking,
that there's only one thing that could possibly happen, who's correct, me or him?
God knows the one outcome. That doesn't mean there was one possibility.
Oh wait, so does God know that if he knows something that it's inevitable?
From his perspective, it's inevitable. Yes, that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
agent
Does
doesn't have
God
free
know
will.
that if X is inevitable, then it's not possible for X to not happen?
Yeah, he knows that.
And does God know that if it's not possible for X to not happen, then there are no choices?
From his perspective, there's no choices. That's a weird term to use, but this is what I mean. You're equivocating, right? I don't know why we're arguing free will. Can we talk about the Kalam?
Well, it sounds like the conversation is kind of at a
Yeah.
stalemate.
Yeah, I think Justin has to get going.
Which is fine.
Wait.
Two
Can I
two
just make
p.m.
one
is
point? I'll just make one point.
2 p.m. is my cutoff point, but
Sure, yeah.
we're live all the time on our individual accounts. You're more than welcome to show up at Ian's next live stream or anywhere else and challenge him on these points.
Yeah, please. I don't know. I enjoyed the conversation, right? It was good. Definitely better than last time.
All right, thanks. No worries.
All right, cheers.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Have a good one.
Imagine having to do that amount of somersaults to justify the God. And if I had to guess, this is a guess, my guess is he doesn't know what's in the Bible. I feel like you should start with the Bible.
Yeah. Although I do think, presumably for atheists, if your goal is to convince atheists, then I get it, that you're using an argument that concludes God's existence. But
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I think if I was a Christian, gosh, well, obviously I'd run the fine-tuning argument, but I think the actual thing that you need to run to prove Christianity is maybe the resurrection. I just don't see any other way that one
Right.
might even prove it.
I don't think there is a good way. I think if you're a believer and you're watching this, the best thing you can do is just admit that your faith is a faith and not a fact, and be okay in public admitting that you believe in something that isn't necessarily provable. You just have to take it on faith. I think that's the most honest position.
That's true. I definitely think that's the most honest. Although I've heard some very dishonest interlocutors who will run through like chains of like, we know that they're eyewitness testimony because we have like John, disciple of like Papias, disciple of like Irenaeus, disciple of Polycarp, and that's how we know. And it's like, wow, yeah, like if you just find like the most niche chain you could possibly find, and then that's the argument for the resurrection.
You have to jump through a lot of hoops. Either way, it never fixes the problems of the Bible. Like even if you did believe that Jesus resurrected, it never fixes the contradictions in the Bible. You just have to assume that God made mistakes in the book. But let me grab. We got two more super chats. We've got one from our friend Frederick. Good to see you, Frederick. He says all these arguments end up with a disembodied, conscious, intelligent agent with universe-creating capabilities. I see no justifiable reason to affirmatively believe in such a thing, and I couldn't agree more. Um, but that is a weird thing that that's how people conceive of God. It's like all the prior God concepts failed. So they're like, I need to invent a God concept that's unfalsifiable. And that's what they did. Here's something that they can never test.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think, well, if you want like really strong inductive argument or evidence against it, I've just never encountered a mind that doesn't have a brain, so I have no reason to think that this mind without a brain exists.
100%. And Larry Beck, thank you for the 666. It says this the first time I've seen a Phil bro and a philosopher have a conversation. We gotta love some Ian. I agree. I'm so happy that Ian was here because if I had to talk to City, I probably would have ended the conversation after about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I love this stuff. I thought it was fascinating.
We really need people like Ian in the debate space because guys like me can't tolerate it. But with that, guys, it's 2 p.m. We're going to be live on AXP, Ian and I both, at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. Please stop in and support the stream at AXP. And are you going live at all today, other than AXP?
No, I'm deep into the process of like repotting some of my plants, so I'll probably spend between now and then repotting my plants and taking a shower.
Oh, some people are asking what's AXP. AXP is the atheist experience. You know the old show; it's been around for 29 years. They're starting to get involved with some debaters from the TikTok sphere, and so we're going to be on today debating the existence of God on the atheist experience at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. So please stop in and chirp in the comments and support the show. We really appreciate that. And thanks for being here and supporting this show, supporting our work here. And I guess it looks like we'll